As a modern person who has just transmigrated, I am actually going to participate in the Blue Star's Otherworld transmission, going to a Wuxia or Xianxia world for a whole year of adventure. What is even more absurd is that this guy next to me says his ancestors produced a golden core true immortal, while I only have a short blade in my hand, without even a decent cultivation method. Yun City No. 2 Middle School. The playground. On one side, parents in modern clothing are squeezed outside the fence. On the other, over 600 high school sophomores in ancient costumes, equipped with swords and blades. The style is so eerie that it looks like the opening scene of a large-scale costume drama. You stand in the crowd, your head still a bit dizzy. The last memory was a bet with a friend to memorize the entire 9 turns mysterious technique. Then the blinding high-beam lights of a transport truck, the sharp sound of brakes, the body flying up in severe pain. And when I woke up, I was here. Ancient costumes, swords and blades, glowing stones, strange patterns flickering on the ground. You look down at yourself. Coarse cloth clothes, a broken belt, a heavy, sharpened short blade. This is not your body that has been overdrawn by staying up late for years. It is at most 17 or 18 years old. Meng Chuan, what are you spacing out for? A pretty girl with a high ponytail, wearing light green sportswear, tugged at your sleeve, frowning at you. Your face is so pale. Don't be too nervous. As long as you are randomized into a low martial world, the mortality rate is less than 3%. Another memory flooded in. Blue Star, a world similar to Earth but with otherworld transmigration. Everyone who reaches the age of 16 has one opportunity for physical transmigration. 1 year later on Blue Star, no matter how much time has passed in the otherworld, as long as you are alive, you will be forcibly transmitted back, and everything obtained will be brought back to Blue Star. Wuxia World, white light pillar, low martial, mortality rate below 3%. Green, high martial, over 10%. Xianxia World, blue, low immortal, over 20%. Purple, high immortal, over 30%. Prehistoric World, golden light pillar, no survivors in history, nicknamed the Golden Jedi. The original Meng Chuan. Parents are ordinary, run a convenience store in a small city, and have a younger sister. The family background is average. The original plan was to choose a safe low martial world, achieve some success, come back to take the martial arts university exam, and find a job to subsidize the family. Meng Chuan, still spacing out. The principal is going to speak. You look up, and see a spirited old man on the podium clearing his throat. Students, today is September 1st, also the day of departure to the otherworld. This is an opportunity to rewrite your life, and also a test where you are responsible for your own life and death. For 800 years, some have brought back peerless skills to establish sects, some have sought immortal fate to found families, and some have remained there forever. What to choose is up to you. You bear the consequences yourself. Now, please all students enter the transmission array area. Close your eyes, meditate and recite the world you want to go to. Wuxia or Xianxia. Remember, 1,000 times, 1,000 times, 1,000 times. Do not choose the prehistoric world. That is a dead end from which no one has ever survived. You follow the crowd into the transmission array. The thin and tall boy Xiao Yan next to you has sweaty palms. The brawny man Luo Feng next to him pats his back. Really bumped into it. The knife in your hand is just for show. Not far away, Chen Beixian, who has jade beads wrapped around his wrist, said softly, my Chen family ancestors produced a golden core true immortal. As long as I have gains, I might not be able to condense a golden core and return. He scanned the crowd, his eyes carrying a faint arrogance. If I enter a high immortal world, within 5 years, I will definitely be able to build a foundation. You look at the sharpened short blade in your hand, then look at the jade beads carved with runes on Chen Beixian's wrist, and remain silent for a few seconds. You don't know anything. You don't even know the realm divisions of this world. The transmission stone begins to glow. The patterns on the ground light up one by one. The color deepens. You haven't decided where to go. Others have family heritage, family cultivation methods, clear goals. You only have a broken belt, a short blade, and a head that has just transmigrated and hasn't recovered yet. The light pillars begin to fall. You close your eyes. Choose Wuxia, or Xianxia, or meditate and recite the world you want to go to. The principal's voice is drowned out by the increasingly loud humming. You unconsciously grit your teeth. You meditate on the Wuxia world. The corresponding colored transmission light pillar will descend accordingly. Low martial, high martial, it all depends on luck. The Xianxia world is the same. Low immortal, high immortal are randomized. I am here, on behalf of the school, wishing every student a prosperous martial luck on this journey, and a smooth path of Tao. Following the principal's voice, the crystal in the center of the playground emitted a low hum. Streams of light shot out from the bottom of the stone, spreading along the patterns on the ground. In the blink of an eye, it set up a huge light array covering most of the playground. Meng Chuan walked into the array with the crowd. The students around had already closed their eyes one after another, with different expressions: nervous, expectant, devout. Some were pale, their eyelashes trembling slightly. He also closed his eyes. What to choose? According to the original body's plan, the Wuxia world is the safest. Low martial mortality rate is below 3%. Even if luck is bad, randomized to a high martial world with a mortality rate of over 10%. Be cautious. You can always survive and come back. However, those who were on Earth, not afraid of the risk of sudden death, staying up late to chase the prehistoric novels, those magnificent present, mythical legends that make one yearn for them. Pangu who created the world, Luo Ho of the Tao demon struggle, Hongjun who lectured at Xixiao, the three pure ones who established teachings to become saints, Hutu who incarnated into reincarnation. Can you really not go and see them with your own eyes? The most critical point is, why is it exactly the prehistoric world? Why is its name exactly the same as the ancient myths on Earth? Why did you happen to memorize the top saint-making method of internal and external cultivation? The 9 turns mysterious technique. Half an hour before transmigrating, a crazy idea grew from the bottom of his heart like a vine, tightly entwining all his reason. He remembered his inexplicable transmigration here, remembered that today is the day of departure, remembered the complex information in his mind that could be called a prehistoric encyclopedia, while Blue Star's understanding of the prehistoric was merely death, Jedi, no return. This world does not have any information about the prehistoric circulating. Is it a coincidence? Or is it the arrangement of fate? Begin transmission. The principal shouted like thunder. The crystal immediately erupted with a blinding light. One after another, transmission light pillars poured down from the firmament, accurately covering every student. White, green, blue, purple. Light pillars lit up one after another, reflecting 600 completely different faces. Some saw white light fall, and let out a long sigh of relief, showing a relieved smile. Some were shrouded in green light, clenched their fists in excitement. Some stood in blue light with a solemn expression, and some stood in purple light with their backs straight. Xiao Yan's body lit up with white light. Low martial world. As he wished, he was stunned for a moment, then smiled, nodding hard to his parents waving constantly from the side of the field. Luo Feng was swallowed by green light. High martial world. He laughed out loud, gave a thumbs up in the direction of Chen Beixian, his figure fading in the light. Chen Beixian was shrouded in purple light. High immortal world. His expression was calm. His hands formed seals. A faint cyan halo appeared around him. The family cultivation method was already operating. Figures disappeared one after another in the light pillars, as if they had never existed. Soon, there were few students left on the playground. The remaining few, including Meng Chuan, became the focus of the whole audience. Meng Chuan still closed his eyes, but his heart was already made up. He would not go to Wuxia, nor would he go to Xianxia. He wanted to go to the prehistoric, the Death Jedi where no one from Blue Star had ever survived, the myth that only existed on Earth, the place that only he understood what it meant. Prehistoric world, prehistoric world. He kept repeating in his heart, meditating and imagining simultaneously in his mind. The next moment, a vast, ancient, indescribable power descended from the sky, completely shrouding him. This power was magnificent, like the starry sky collapsing. He opened his eyes. It was gold, pure, scalding, as if it could burn the soul. The golden light pillar slammed down straight from the 9 heavens, swallowing him whole. The golden light was too dazzling, instantly illuminating the entire playground, the entire school, the entire street. What is that? Gold, golden light? Impossible. How could it be golden? Prehistoric. Someone chose the prehistoric world? Who? Are they crazy? Screaming, shouting, incredulous cries exploded like a tide at this moment. By the field, Meng Chuan's mother, Wang Xiulan, saw the dazzling golden light descending from the sky and shrouding her son. Her face turned as pale as paper, her body swayed, and she collapsed softly. His father, Meng Shanha, hurriedly supported his wife, looking at the blurry figure of his son in the golden light. Tears poured down from the face carved with wrinkles by the years. The microphone in the principal's hand fell with a crash. He stared wide-eyed, his lips trembling, his throat felt like it was throttled, unable to make a sound. Under the shroud of golden light, Meng Chuan felt his body being dismantled and reassembled. His consciousness passed through layer after layer of indescribable barriers. At the last instant before it completely disappeared, he turned his head, looked at the original mother who had fainted on the field, the original father with tears all over his face, and the girl next to them who was covering her mouth and crying, the original sister, Meng Xiaoyu. Sorry. He moved his lips. The voice was so low that only he could hear it. But I must go. Life has only this one opportunity to go to another world. Since I have the fate to transmigrate here, how can I not choose the prehistoric? Go there. Either become an immortal and ancestor to return with glory, or be buried forever in the prehistoric with no bones left. The golden light soared into the sky, sinking into the depths of the clouds, and disappeared. The playground fell into a brief silence. A pin could be heard dropping. A few seconds later, an uproar arose. Someone really chose the prehistoric? Decades. Nobody in Yun City has chosen this world of death for decades. Who is that? Seems to be Meng Chuan from Class 7, Grade 11. His family conditions seem average. Just opened a small convenience store in the old city. He is crazy. Doesn't he know he won't be able to come back? It's over. What about his parents? This child is too selfish. That night, the Yun City local news channel broadcasted an emergency. This morning, a startling event occurred at the day of departure ceremony of Yun City No. 2 Middle School. A grade 11 student chose to enter the prehistoric world with no survival. This is the first case in our city in the last 30 years. Reminder again, the prehistoric world is dangerously unknown. No one in history has ever returned. Please choose rationally and cherish your life. In the news footage, there were Meng Chuan's parents hugging and crying in the hospital corridor, the younger sister Meng Xiaoyu sitting on the side with her head down, and the school leaders with heavy expressions. This This incident once topped the local hot search list, rushing into the top 10 of the national hot search. In the comments section, some mocked Meng Chuan for not knowing better, and seeking his own death, or pitted his family, and scolded him for being too selfish. After the golden light completely dissipated, Meng Chuan landed on a reddish land. He lay on the ground, gasping heavily, his heartbeat thumping like a drum. A few seconds later, he managed to lift his head, and then, he froze. The sky he saw was cyan gray, dizzyingly high. The clouds were thick, as if they could fall at any time. There were mountains in the distance, standing alone like giant pillars. The mountains were wrapped in visible cyan airflow. The air was filled with indescribable smells, the earthy smell after a thunderstorm, the fragrance of ancient grass and trees, mixed with a metallic rust smell. But these were not important. What was important was, the moment he inhaled his first breath, he felt like his whole body was about to explode. Cough. Meng Chuan clutched his throat, his eyes instantly bloodshot, just because, the moment before, a power that was violent and completely unreasonable, rushed into his body through his mouth, nose, and pores frantically. Pain. Every cell felt like it was bursting. Vessels under the skin bulged, as if something alive was wriggling inside. Bones made sounds of groaning. His vision went black. A buzzing sound came in his ears. Was he going to die as soon as he landed? As Meng Chuan's heart sank, he also suddenly realized, no wonder, no one from Blue Star had ever survived the prehistoric. This prehistoric world could no longer be considered spiritual energy rich. It was like throwing a person into an extremely terrifying high-pressure reaction furnace. At the last moment before his consciousness blurred, for words flashed like lightning in his mind. 9 turns mysterious technique. Before transmigrating, the complete version he memorized on a bet with his friend. Those extremely awkward sentences now emerged from the depths of his memory one by one. Chaos is not divided. Heaven and earth are chaotic. 9 turns of mysterious technique. Tao is born naturally. The first turn is the base, gathering energy like the sea. He almost unconsciously followed the formula to operate. Or rather, it was his body instinctively seeking survival. Boom! The violent power in his body that was on the verge of bursting suddenly found a vent. They no longer rammed blindly, but were guided by invisible trajectories, flowing along a path he had never perceived before. Wherever they passed, torn meridians were brutally repaired, widened, broken vessels were forcibly joined, faint gold appeared on the surface of his bones. The pain not only did not diminish, but became even clearer. But this time, it was no longer destruction, but remodeling. It was as if an invisible hand had dismantled his mortal body, and reassembled it with more resilient materials. Meng Chuan curled up on the ground, twitching all over, sweat pouring down like rain, but it was instantly evaporated by the scorching red earth. He gritted his teeth, his mouth full of blood. 10 fingers dug deeply into the soil. I don't know how long it took, maybe only 10 minutes, or maybe an hour or two, when the last trace of violent power was tamed, and incorporated into the nascent energy vortex in his dantian. Meng Chuan lay on the ground, gasping for air, unable to even move his fingers, but the surging power coming from his body was so clear that it made his scalp tingle. After a while, he struggled to lift his hand, only to see a layer of thin gray-black dirt on his skin, obviously the impurities discharged from his body. In addition, his muscle lines had become fluid and taut, as if they contained a powerful explosive force far exceeding the past. More importantly, he found that he could see inside. In his dantian, a golden energy vortex the size of a fist, incomparably solid, was slowly rotating. Every time it turned, strands of golden silk would swim through his meridians to nourish every inch of his flesh and bones. 9 turns mysterious technique. First turn, driven by the terrifying spiritual energy of the prehistoric, directly entered. Meng Chuan supported the ground with both hands, staggered and stood up. He looked at his hands, then looked up at the vast, terrifying cyan gray sky, and then, he grinned, smiling silently. The smile was ugly, carrying the exhaustion of surviving a disaster. Earth Immortal. According to the 9 turns mysterious technique, the first turn was cultivated, corresponding to the Earth Immortal level in the prehistoric cultivation system. Because this technique cultivates both primordial spirit and flesh, he is now an Earth Immortal in both primordial spirit and flesh. However, in the prehistoric, this was just the beginning of the immortal realm that had broken away from the mortal realm. In the eyes of true great powers, he was still an insignificant ant. But on Blue Star, Meng Chuan remembered the arrogance in Chen Beishuan's eyes when he mentioned foundation building. After foundation building is golden core, then primordial infant, spirit severing, void refining, integration, Mahayana. Only after transcending the tribulation and ascending can one become a heavenly immortal. Earth Immortal, equivalent to the tribulation period in a high-level Xianxia world. He broke through to Earth Immortal without a heavenly tribulation, which shows that at this time in the prehistoric, Hongjun had not yet merged with the heavenly Tao, because after Hongjun merged with the Tao, he would set a heavenly tribulation for all living beings to break through to immortality. Hongjun has not merged with the Tao. Nuwa has naturally not created humans. In other words, the current prehistoric has only innate beings, and before the birth of the human race, the weakest of the prehistoric innate beings are at least Earth Immortals. Thinking of this, Meng Chuan couldn't help but laugh at himself. But regardless, he Meng Chuan, on his first day in the prehistoric, taking only an hour or two at most, had entered entered a realm that top-tier cultivators on Blue Star could not reach. Meng Chuan tried to take a deep breath again. This time, there was no splitting pain. The rich, substantive innate spiritual energy of the prehistoric rushed in through his mouth and nose, swallowed and refined by the energy vortex in his dantian, and converted into strands of pure earth immortal mana. He clenched his fists, power flowing between his bones. Earth immortal might be the ceiling on Blue Star, but during this period of the prehistoric, it was just the lowest level of ants. He looked around, red earth stretching to the end of his vision, giant mountains in the distance standing silently above the sky. From time to time, unknown giant birds flew by, with wingspans over 100 meters. The shadow cast was enough to cover the entire playground of Yun City No. 2 Middle School. This area was terrifyingly quiet, except for the sound of the wind and his own breathing and heartbeat. There was no other sound. Although the first turn was achieved, it only gave him the most basic qualifications to survive here. Next, he needed to further understand the situation of this prehistoric world. For example, specifically which period of the prehistoric it was now. The only thing that could be confirmed was that Hongjun had not yet merged with the heavenly Dao. Lohan tribulation, Dao demon struggle, Zixiao lecture. Meng Chuan's gaze fell on the mountains in the distance. The terrain there was higher. Maybe he could see further. Let's go there and take a look first. The moment he took a step, his body was so light that he almost staggered. Leaping gently, he actually covered a distance of hundreds of meters. The Earth Immortal's flesh was truly extraordinary. He adapted for a few steps, and walked towards the nearest red giant mountain. The sand and stones under his feet were scorching, and the ancient atmosphere permeated the air. Every step he took left shallow footprints on the red soil, but they were quickly smoothed out by the wind. After walking for a while, the outline of the mountain gradually became clear, those cyan airflows wrapping around the mountain. Only when he looked closely did he realize it was not airflow, but would attribute spiritual energy that had concentrated into substance, attracted by the mountain, lingering and not dissipating. In a certain part of the foot of the mountain, the cyan energy was exceptionally rich, cyan light bands that were almost liquefied, constantly floating in the air. In the center of the light bands, vaguely visible, was a dark red object, half buried in the soil. Meng Chuan's heart skipped a beat. He held his breath, slowed his pace, and approached. 200 meters away, when there was no obstruction, he finally saw clearly that it was a broken spear. The spear body was pitch black, covered with spider web-like cracks. In the depths of the cracks flowed dark red, things that looked like solidified blood. The tip of the spear had broken, with only less than 2 inches of residual sharp edge remaining. But even so, the fierce killing intent emitted by the residual edge still made the energy vortex in Meng Chuan's dantian pause. Just looking at it made him feel a tingling pain in his eyes. The red soil next to the spear shaft was dyed a strange dark brown, where nothing grew. Meng Chuan stopped 100 meters away, not daring to go any further. Instinct told him this thing was very dangerous, but another thought could not help but emerge uncontrollably. Prehistoric, innate spiritual treasures everywhere. Only the first day, and I encountered one. He stared at the broken spear. His breathing involuntarily quickened. Should I take it? The fierce killing intent of the spear tip's residual edge, like ice-cold thin needles, separated by 100 meters, could bring bursts of tingling pain to his skin. Its horror could be imagined. The golden energy vortex in his dantian sped up. Mana circulated spontaneously, resisting that cold chill. This was definitely not a mortal object, maybe not even an ordinary spiritual object. He slowly lifted his right hand, 5 fingers virtually grasping. A strand of extremely dim golden mana shot out from his fingertips, condensed into a thin silk, and probed toward the broken spear. The golden silk had just approached within 10 meters of the broken spear. The dark red blood light on the spear suddenly lit up. The broken spear body shook violently, making a sound that made one's teeth ache. Frightening. At the same time, a fierce and evil aura 10 times more violent than before erupted, turning into dark red ripples visible to the naked eye, sweeping out in all directions. Meng Chuan's face changed. He retreated for the first time, but it was still a step late. The dark red ripples swept over, and his whole body's mana felt as if it were frozen. The golden silk snapped inch by inch. What was even more terrifying was a brutal killing will, reversing along the broken mana, rushed directly into his sea of consciousness. The scene before his eyes changed. No longer red mountains and wild soil, but a sea of corpses and mountains of blood, ash drifting between heaven and earth. The earth dyed dark red, countless remains piled up into mountains, a pitch-black long spear piercing heaven and earth. The spear body wrapped in the wailing of billions of grievances. Wake up! A clear shout sounded like thunder in his sea of consciousness. The illusion shattered instantly. Meng Chuan groaned, retreated 7 steps. Blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. Looking slightly embarrassed, he looked up in horror, and found that he had actually reached within 1 meter of the broken spear. His right hand was extending towards the spear shaft, his fingertips only an inch away from the spear body. If it hadn't been for that clear shout, the consequences would have been unimaginable. He hurriedly withdrew his hand, his back soaked in cold sweat. If you don't want to be swallowed by the remnant will of the god-slaying spear, stay away from it. The voice came from behind. Meng Chuan hurriedly turned around, and saw, beside the red mountain rock, a person standing at some point. It was a girl. Looking about about half a head shorter than him, with a slender figure, wearing a simple dark yellow hemp skirt, standing barefoot on the scorching red earth, her long hair casually tied up with a bone pin, a few broken strands of hair falling by her cheeks. Her face was clean, unstained by worldly smoke. Her eyebrows were clear, her nose bridged straight, her lips light in color. What was most eye-catching was her eyes, calm and gentle, like a deep pool that had precipitated for 10,000 years, reflecting the sky and clouds, and also reflecting the slightly frightened Meng Chuan at this moment. She just stood there quietly, but it made Meng Chuan's hair stand on end. The other party gave him a sense of heavy, vast, indescribable pressure, as if she were not a person, but the earth under his feet, the red mountains in the distance, a terrifying existence concretized by everything he could see. Meng Chuan's throat felt dry, subconsciously urging all his mana, the energy vortex in his dantian spinning wildly, but the girl just glanced at him lightly, and it was just this one glance that actually made the mana surging in his body instantly solidify, as if suppressed by the whole earth, unable to move even his fingertips. Cultivation is at the entry-level earth immortal, but the foundation is solid. The girl's gaze stayed on him for a while. A trace of very faint strange color flashed in her eyes. Then she returned to calm. Which cave heaven did you little cultivator run out from? Did your teacher not warn you? The prehistoric earth. Unknown objects cannot be touched lightly. Meng Chuan opened his mouth, realizing he could make a sound. Junior Meng Chuan wandered into this place unintentionally. He forcibly steadied his mind, clasped his fists and bowed. Thank you, senior, for saving me. Senior? The girl shook her head slightly. This action slightly reduced that heavy pressure, adding a bit of vitality. Do I look like an old thing who has lived for 18,000 years? Meng Chuan's expression stalled. Forget it. The girl waved her hand. Her bare feet took 2 steps forward, her gaze falling on the broken spear. The god-slaying spear remnant. How could it be here? She stretched out her right hand, her 5 fingers slender, skin like lubricated jade. Without seeing any mana fluctuations, she just grabbed the broken spear in the void. The broken spear trembled violently. The dark red blood light flourished. The fierce killing intent erupted again, but this time, all the killing intent was 3 feet in front of the girl's palm, like hitting an invisible barrier, no longer able to advance even an inch. Quiet. The girl spoke softly. 2 words fell, words followed by law. That broken spear that was originally terrifyingly fierce, actually truly, became quiet. The dark red blood light quickly converged. The red light in the cracks of the spear body dimmed, and finally turned into an unremarkable pitch-black residual soldier. Clatter. It fell to the ground. Meng Chuan watched until his scalp tingled. The fierce object that almost shattered his soul just now, in the hands of this girl, was actually as docile as an old dog. Your luck is not bad. The girl stood in place, her right hand virtually supporting. The broken spear on the ground flew up on its own, falling into her hand. This is the god-slaying spear remnant, sealing a wisp of Luo Ho's killing Dao principles. If it were at its peak, just from the touch you made just now, you would have already been destroyed in true spirit. God-slaying spear. Luo Ho? Meng Chuan gasped. Demon ancestor Luo Ho, one of the protagonists of the Dao demon struggle, defeated by Hong Jun combined with Yang Mei, Qiankuan, Yinyang in the final battle, and exploded in the west, making the west a barren land. This also meant that the time point when he descended to the prehistoric world was after the conclusion of the Dao demon struggle. Suddenly, the girl threw the broken spear over. Following that, Meng Chuan subconsciously reached out to catch it. The broken spear felt cold to the touch. The sensation was very much like metal, yet it seemed heavier than metal. The cracks on the spear body were clear, but that fierce aura was gone without a trace, like an ordinary iron weapon. Since you discovered it first, it belongs to you. The girl's tone was flat. However, with your current cultivation, it is best not to try to refine it. First find a way to seal it, and wait until you step into the golden immortal level before considering refining it. The power I left on it cannot suppress it for too long. Hearing the girl's words, Meng Chuan couldn't help but be stunned. Senior, you want to give it to me, otherwise? The girl glanced at him. This was discovered by you first, and I don't cultivate the Dao of killing. This thing is useless to me. She said it lightly, as if what she gave was just an inexpensive little toy. If it were something else, Meng Chuan might be polite, but this thing. He took a deep breath. His body was very honest and solemnly bowed. Thank you, senior, for the treasure. May I ask for senior's name? The girl turned around, looking at the distant cyan gray sky. The wind blew the broken hair by her cheek, revealing a side face with soft lines. Hutu. The girl spoke, her voice very light, but falling into Meng Chuan's ears. It was no different from a thunderclap from the 9 heavens. Hutu, incarnated into reincarnation, permanently suppressing the underworld. That ancestor which in the prehistoric myths and legends, who was compassionate to the point of cruelty, at this moment, was standing in front of him, barefoot in hemp clothes, eyebrows clear, face young, looking as if she were even younger than him. Meng Chuan's throat felt tight, unable to speak for a while. You have heard of me? Hutu turned back around, her gaze falling on his face, carrying a bit of exploration. Have heard of it? Meng Chuan forcibly suppressed his surging emotions, trying to make his voice stable. Senior is the ancestor witch of the witch clan. Hearing this, the surprise in Hutu's eyes became even stronger. However, she did not pursue the question, just waved her hand. This is not a place to talk. The god-slaying spear remnant has appeared. The fierce aura is leaking. Some fierce beasts in the vicinity, and even some old things might be able to sense it. Let's leave here first. As she spoke, she turned and left. Bare feet stepped on the scorching red earth, leaving not a single trace. Meng Chuan gripped the broken spear, looked around at the silent wasteland, and followed without hesitation. The two of them, one after the other, went west along the foot of the red mountain. Hutu did not walk fast, but every step she took, her figure appeared at an exaggerated distance away, shrinking the ground to an inch. Meng Chuan had to try his best to urge his mana, to barely keep up. After walking for about 15 minutes, Hutu suddenly stopped. Here we are. Meng Chuan looked up, and saw a valley entrance appearing in front of them. The valley entrance was narrow, only allowing two people to pass side by side. The mountain walls on both sides were steep, appearing dark red. Close up, you could see natural twisted patterns on the rock walls, like ancient charms. Cool breezes blew out from the valley, carrying the moist and fresh scent of grass and trees. Refreshing. Compared to the scorching heat of the outside world, it was simply like two different worlds. Follow me in. Hutu entered first. Meng Chuan followed closely, passing through the narrow valley. The view suddenly opened up. The valley was actually full of life. Green grass like a carpet, ancient trees reaching the sky. In the center was a clear blue pool, clear to the bottom, light purple unknown flowers blooming by the pool, and several small waterfalls hanging down from the mountain walls in the distance, with murmuring water sounds. The spiritual energy of this place, although still as rich, but it was much gentler, no longer having the violent pressure of the outside world. Sit. Hutu walked to a flat blue stone by the pool and sat down, patting the side. Meng Chuan hesitated for a moment, then went over and sat down. You have the aura of the Father God on you. Hutu spoke straight to the point, her gaze falling on his face, calm and direct. Although it is very faint, but I will not recognize it wrongly. Where did your cultivation method come from? Meng Chuan's heart skipped a beat. So, this was the reason the other party took care of him. The 9 turns mysterious technique had been discovered. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind, but he did not dare to hesitate on his face. Junior obtained a incomplete cultivation method by chance, named 9 turns mysterious technique. 9 turns mysterious technique, Hutu repeated in a low voice. The surprise in her eyes could no longer be covered. Sure enough, it is the root of the Father God's proof of the Tao through strength, which has long been lost. Where did you get it from? An ancient ruin, Meng Chuan said with a stiff scalp. Hutu stared at him for a moment, suddenly chuckled. The smile was extremely faint, like ripples spreading on the pool, but it made her clear and pretty face instantly vivid. Forget it. Everyone has secrets. She didn't pursue it, just shook her head lightly. You can obtain this cultivation method. It is an opportunity, and also a cause and effect. Cultivate well. Don't disgrace it. Meng Chuan secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Yes, since you have inherited the Father God's legacy, you can be considered to have a bond with our witch clan. Hutu took a dark yellow bone piece from her sleeve, and handed it to him. This is my token. Carry this object, and you can enter the witch clan ancestral land in the Buzhou mountain. If you encounter danger, crush the bone piece, and I will be able to perceive it. The bone piece felt warm, carved with a simple rune, like an ancient earth character. Meng Chuan solemnly accepted it. Thank you, Ancestor Witch Hutu. Don't call me Ancestor Witch. Hutu stood up, her bare feet stepping on the grass. You can just call me Hutu. She paused, looking out of the valley. The prehistoric is dangerous. Your cultivation is still shallow. Don't wander around everywhere. Cultivate in this valley first. There is an array I set up at the valley entrance. It won't be easily discovered by the outside world. Wait until you have achieved success in cultivation, before leaving the valley. As the words fell, her figure gradually faded, like a reflection in water, dissipating into the air. Only the last sentence floated into Meng Chuan's ears. That god-slaying spear remnant, before refining it, can be sealed at the bottom of the pool. The pool water is the earth vein spiritual milk, which can suppress the fierce evil. Meng Chuan stood in place, holding the bone piece that still had the residual warmth of the girl's palm, remaining motionless for a long time. The pool water was clear, reflecting the cyan gray sky, and his slightly confused face. He lowered his head, looking at the pitch-black broken spear in his hand. God-slaying spear. Hutu. Which clan? Prehistoric. Everything came too fast, just like a tornado. No, it was like an extremely absurd dream, but the warm touch of the bone piece in his hand, the golden energy vortex slowly rotating in his dantian, the thick prehistoric spiritual energy in the air that couldn't be melted, all were telling him that all of this was true. Meng Chuan turned around, walked to the edge of the blue pool. The pool water was bottomless, white spiritual mist floating on the surface. He hesitated for a moment, and gently placed the broken spear into the water. The broken spear entered the water, sinking silently, without splashing half a drop of water. Under the water surface, dark red blood light flashed away, and was then swallowed by the blue-green pool water. Meng Chuan sat cross-legged by the pool, closed his eyes, the 9 turns mysterious technique flowing through his heart, cultivating extra carefully. Just like this, Meng Chuan lived in the valley. In the following period of time, Hutu did not appear again, but the valley she left behind was indeed, as she said, quiet, safe. The roars of fierce beasts outside, and the terrifying auras that occasionally flew by, were all isolated by the array at the valley entrance. Inside the valley was like a paradise, forming a a world of its own. During the day, Meng Chuan sat by the pool to operate the 9 turns mysterious technique to cultivate. The innate spiritual energy of the prehistoric was so rich that it was almost liquefied. Every breath and inhalation formed cyan-white energy vortexes between his mouth and nose. The golden energy vortex inside his dantian grew at a staggering speed visible to the naked eye, from the size of a fist, gradually filling up to half of his dantian. On the 7th day, he broke through to the earth immortal middle stage. The faint golden luster under his skin became more obvious. As he moved, mana flowed naturally. He punched the black rock at the bottom of the valley. The rock surface cracked upon hearing it, with cracks as deep as several feet. But Meng Chuan did not have half a joy. He had seen Huta lift her hand to suppress the god-slaying spear remnant, seen her barefoot stepping on the ground, shortening the ground to an inch. Earth immortal middle stage, in the prehistoric, was still a lowest level ant. Every day at noon, when the sun was strongest, Meng Chuan would dive to the bottom of the pool. The pool was about 10 feet deep, with fine and soft white sand at the bottom. The pitch-black broken spear was just stuck in the sand. Around 3 inches, the sand presented a charred black color that had been scorched. Even with the suppression of the earth-vein spiritual milk, when he approached, he could still feel the lurking fierce will. He sat cross-legged about a foot away from the spear, looking from afar. At first, it was just letting the spear get familiar with his aura, continuously for several days, until he felt the timing was just about right. Did he dare to use his divine sense slightly? He only separated a wisp of extremely thin divine sense, cautiously probing like a silk thread. In this way, even if he were backlashed, he would be sure to retreat safely. The divine sense wandered on the surface of the spear body. He could see the dense, spider web-like cracks on the spear shaft. In the depths of the cracks, dark red light would flicker from time to time, like the pulse of a sleeping fierce beast. It's done. While somewhat surprised, Meng Chuan heard some broken sounds. Kill, Dao, hate, intermittently, full of unwillingness and resentment. It was the remnant will of the demon ancestor Luo Ho. After lasting for a period of time, Meng Chuan withdrew his divine sense, floated to the water surface to pant. Didn't expect to have gains this way. Those fragments of killing intent, although brutal, contained a certain purest, most primitive Dao, like an imprint of Dao principles. He vaguely touched a hint of the essence of killing from it. Half a month later, he broke through to the earth immortal late stage. The vortex in his dantian had turned into a golden lake. The mana condensed to the extreme. He pointed out. The pool water 3 feet away exploded into a water column, rising several feet high. He stood by the pool, watching the water splash down, and then, he tried to mobilize a wisp of killing essence he had gained from the god-slaying spear's remnant. Xianxia, the sound of the air being torn, was sharply piercing. The water column was not blown up, but was cut from the middle by a dark red thin line. The cut surface was as smooth as a mirror. The thin line continued to trend, slashing on the opposite rock wall, leaving a crack as deep as a foot, with charred edges. Around the crack, grass and trees withered instantly. The power could be called a qualitative change. A bit interesting. A voice, without any warning, came from behind. Meng Chuan turned around. Hutu did not know when she stood 3 feet behind him, still in that dark yellow hemp dress, barefoot, carrying a small beast that was completely snowy white and shaped like a deer in her hand. The small beast was already dead, with a small blood hole on its neck. Not a drop of blood flowed out. Senior, Meng Chuan withdrew his mana, having a feeling of being embarrassed for showing off. Call me. Forget it. You love to call it what you want. Hutu gave up on making Meng Chuan change his address, walked to the pool, and casually threw the small beast on the ground. She glanced at him. Earth immortal late stage. The progress is not slow. She walked to the crack on the rock wall, stretched out her fingertip, and gently touched the charred edge. You have some guts. With only earth immortal cultivation, you dare to contemplate the killing Dao principles of the god-slaying spear. Meng Chuan smiled awkwardly. However, the result is good. Hutu turned around, sat on the blue stone, and patted the side. Sit. Meng Chuan obediently sat down. Hutu took a leather bag the size of a palm from her sleeve, pulled out the stopper, and took a sip with her head tilted. There was a clear aroma of wine floating out, mixed with the sweetness of some kind of fruit. Drink? She handed the leather bag over. Meng Chuan hesitated for a moment, took it, and learned her way of drinking a sip. The liquid entered his throat, first cold, then turned into a scorching warm current, rushing directly to his dantian from his throat. The golden lake in his dantian surged, actually growing a circle larger visible to the naked eye. This is... Meng Chuan was horrified. The witch clan's wine. Huta took back the leather bag, took another sip. With the spiritual fruits at the foot of Buzhou Mountain, added with the essence of the earth vein. It's a bit good for someone with your cultivation. Not just a bit good. Meng Chuan could feel. Just this one sip was worth half a month of his hard practice. Many thanks. Not for nothing, Huta said, while pointing to the snowy white small beast on the ground. Next, you are responsible for skinning it, cleaning it, and roasting it. Meng Chuan was stunned for a moment, then stood up, and picked up the small beast. The beast corpse felt cold. The fur was extraordinarily soft. Meng Chuan found a sharp stone flake, and began to handle it. Huta sat on the blue stone, watching his clumsy movements, occasionally giving pointers. This is a snow spirit deer, living in extremely cold places, fast but cowardly. Bury the internal organs deep, otherwise the blood aura will attract other fierce beasts. although they can't come into the valley, but they will be noisy. Meng Chuan did as he was told, handling this kind of ingredient for the first time. His movements were unfamiliar. Fortunately, he had cultivation, big strength and skillful hands, barely counting as neat. By the time he had cleaned the deer meat and set it up to roast, the day was already dusk. There was no real sunset in the valley, but the daylight dimmed, the cyan-gray sky turned deep blue, and finally turned into a gloomy ink color. The pool water reflected the firelight, rippling. Hutu fished out a few fruits the size of a fist from nowhere, and threw two to Meng Chuan. The fruit was dark red, with smooth skin. Biting it, the juice was abundant, sweet but with a bit of astringency. After entering his stomach, it turned into a warm current to nourish the meridians. This is a red ju fruit, growing near the fire vein. Hutu gnawed the fruit, the firelight illuminating her side face, softening a bit. It can temper the flesh. Good for your cultivation of the 9 turns mysterious technique. Meng Chuan ate silently. The roast meat slowly ripened, the grease dripping into the fire pile and crackling. The fragrance permeated. Hutu tore off a deer leg, not afraid of the heat, and bit into it straight away. Craftsmanship is average, she evaluated, but she didn't eat slowly. Meng Chuan learned from her, tore off a piece of meat. The texture was extremely tender, melting in the mouth, without putting any seasoning, yet it carried an indescribable freshness and sweetness. What was even more strange was that the meat contained a gentle energy, fusing into his limbs and bones. Warm, extraordinarily comfortable. The two of them didn't speak again. Meng Chuan looked at the girl's side face, once again thinking of the legends about her. Incarnated into reincarnation, permanently suppressing the underworld, compassionate to the point of cruelty, benevolent to the point of resolution. What are you looking at? Hutu noticed his gaze, raised her eyes and met his. Meng Chuan retracted his gaze guiltily. Just feel. You are not quite the same as I imagined. How did you imagine I would be? Hutu seemed to be interested. More, majestic, or more. Meng Chuan felt a bit nervous in his heart, trying hard to weigh his words. More like an ancestor witch. Hutu laughed. In the firelight, her smile was very faint, but there was a real smile in her eyes. Ancestor witches are also witches, she said. Witch is also a living being. Will be hungry, will be thirsty, will be injured, will also die. She paused, looking at the jumping flames. But we live longer, have more strength. The bloodline is special. Other than that, it's not much different from the deer in this forest, the birds in the sky. Meng Chuan was silent. He wanted to say, different. You are ancestor witches, made from Pangu's essence and blood, are one of the oldest and most powerful existences in this prehistoric world. The witch clan under your command is about to become the new protagonists of the prehistoric world. Will fight for supremacy with the other protagonist, the demon clan, until both clans perish, withdrawing from the historical stage, to be replaced by the human clan. However, the words reached his lips, but he swallowed them back again. Do you think the prehistoric is big? Hutu asked suddenly. Meng Chuan nodded. Yes, very big. Hutu tore off the last piece of meat, chewing slowly, but also small. Small to the point of, some things cannot be hidden, cannot be avoided. She didn't continue. After eating, she stood up, wiped off the oil stains on her hands. I should go. Meng Chuan hurriedly stood up to see her off, watching her figure completely dissolve into the night. The fire pile gradually went out, the embers glowing dark red. He walked back to the edge of the pool and sat cross-legged, looking up at the ink-colored firmament. There was no moon in the prehistoric night, but the stars were exceptionally bright. Billions of stars dotted the dark blue sky. Coldly looking down at this vast land, he closed his eyes, silently operating the mysterious technique. The golden energy vortex in his dantian slowly rotating. Every time it turned, it grew by 1 point. The valley had no years. When Meng Chuan opened his eyes again, the leaves of the crooked neck tree by the pool had turned yellow and green 3 times. He slowly spat out a turbid breath, the breath condensing like a white practice, hitting the pool surface, rippling circles of ripples. Inside his dantian, that lake of gold had already overflowed to the edge, surging, just 1 line short of breaking through the dam, and merging into a broader river. The 9 turns mysterious technique had already been cultivated to the completion of the first turn, and his cultivation had already entered the earth immortal peak. The next step was to trigger the blood energy and spirit, conquering internally and externally, stepping into the threshold of the second turn, achieving the heavenly immortal body without leakage. 1 turn, 1 heaven. 3 turns, mysterious immortal. 4 turns, golden immortal. Until 8 turns, quasi-saint. 9 turns, become a saint. The road was already at his feet, just step by step climbing. He looked at the bottom of the pool. That pitch-black broken spear was still stuck in the sand. Only the surrounding scorched black range of 3 inches seemed to have expanded by a circle. These 3 years, he observed every day, cautiously probing. Gradually, his comprehension of that wisp of killing Tao principles became deeper. When his fingertip mana was activated, he could already pull out a dark red evil spirit thinner than a hair, but its power was several times stronger than pure mana. Only, not enough. The valley was safe, but also like a greenhouse. He could feel that layer of breakthrough membrane needed a bit of external pressure, or opportunity. Still moved because of stillness. When the voice sounded again, Meng Chuan was not surprised. These 3 years, Hutu had come 4 times, each time appearing silently, sometimes bringing some rare spiritual fruits, sometimes sitting for only a moment, watching him cultivate. light, occasionally giving 2 pointers on the key points of spiritual energy operation. He had asked the other party why she took such good care of him. Hutu replied frankly, saying that a voice seemed to remind her in the dark, establishing a great cause and effect with him, which would have great benefits for her, and for the witch clan. When hearing this, he laughed, and since then, he had also calmly accepted all her kindness. In fact, early on when she gave him the god-slaying spear, he had already made up his mind. Even if Hutu still couldn't avoid the reincarnation fate, he would not let her, and the Earth Tao, become a pawn to complement the heavenly Tao under the great Tao. He would remind her, do his best to help her save her life, to achieve the rightful Earth Tao Supreme Saint under the great Tao, sitting on equal footing with Hongjun who merged with the heavenly Tao. He turned his head to look. She was still barefoot in hemp clothes, standing under the crooked neck tree, carrying a green-skinned gourd in her hand. Her aura seemed to be one with the valley. The earth, if not looked at carefully, almost ignored her existence. Senior, Meng Chuan stood up. I've encountered a bottleneck. Hutu walked over, handed the gourd to him. Meng Chuan took it. It felt slightly heavy, pulled out the stopper. The strong yet mellow wine aroma surged out. Unlike the previous fruit wine, this time the smell was deeper, carrying the heaviness of soil and minerals. Earth Immortal Peak. The threshold of the second turn of the 9 turns mysterious technique has been touched, but it's still missing the last step. He spoke truthfully, and then drank a sip with his head tilted. The wine liquid entered his throat, turning into rolling hot currents. Unlike the previous wine that was gentle and nourishing, it actually carried a scorching aura. Impact, crashing into the limbs and bones. That golden lake that was full, surged instantly, and the realm membrane actually seemed to loosen a bit. Witch Clan's Earth Fire Plasma, brewed with 100 kinds of earth vein spiritual essences. It's very strong. Hutu also took out a gourd and drank a sip, her cheeks slightly flushed, sitting and practicing until heavenly immortal is still the material for being beaten. You lack actual combat, lack that one ray of light in life and death. 3,000 miles west, there is a patch of old forest. There is a semi-collapsed ancient temple in the forest. Hutu leaned against the tree trunk, her gaze cast outside the valley, passed by the day before yesterday, felt that there was something unclean inside. Een and filth intertwined, should be hiding some dirty things crawled out from the underground. Also, a complete spiritual treasure. The aura is extremely pure, just right to overcome een and filth. Go take it, consider it an experience. Complete spiritual treasure. Meng Chuan looked at her. Well, the grade is passable. Hutu's tone remained casual. For you today, it's just right. That place is not peaceful. The spiritual treasure has its own protection, either innate spiritual object, or has already bred trouble. Complete spiritual treasure, even if it was just an ordinary acquired spiritual treasure, was a rare treasure for Meng Chuan today, but the acquisition process was estimated to be not glorious. Many thanks. Meng Chuan gripped the gourd, eager to try in his eyes. No need to say thanks. Hutu waved her hand, took a thin, metal-lustered black scale from her bosom. This thing was very small, and the shape was not regular. Take this. That place has heavy een energy. This scale contains a wisp of Xuanwu true water aura, can ward off evil, and suppress the mind. Paste it on your chest. Meng Chuan took it. The scale felt cold. Faintly, the sound of tides came into his ears. He followed Hutu's instructions, pasting it on his chest, instantly feeling a sense of coolness and peace. Even the mana in his dantian that was surging because of the earth fire plasma had calmed down a bit. Going now? Hutu asked. Going now. Meng Chuan nodded, tying the green-skinned gourd to his waist. He needed combat, needed pressure, needed that one ray of light, and needed a handy spiritual treasure even more. Hutu didn't say any more, just waved her hand. Meng Chuan bowed to Hutu, turned around, and strode out of the valley. The moment he stepped out of the valley, the familiar, slightly violent prehistoric aura rushed toward him, mixed with the beast roars and wind whistling vaguely in the distance. He identified the direction. The golden energy vortex in his body rotated. Mana surged, lightly stepping with his feet. Bang! His figure was like an arrow from a string, shooting away to the west. His speed was several times faster than when he first entered Earth Immortal level. The red earth under his feet retreated rapidly. The scenery on both sides blurred into lines. 3,000 miles. With his current Earth Immortal peak level, it was not too far. Soon, a patch of boundless, ancient forest shrouded in gray-black mist appeared on the horizon. The trees were exceptionally tall, the bark pitch black like iron, the branches and leaves twisted. The forest was silent. No insects or birds, only gray-black mist flowing slowly, revealing ominousness. Meng Chuan stopped at the edge of the forest. The coldness from the Xuanwu scale on his chest increased significantly at this moment, warning him of the danger in the forest. He took a deep breath, operating the 9 turns mysterious technique. A faint golden light appeared on his body, and stepped into the forest. The light instantly dimmed, mist wrapped around him, carrying a damp, rotting atmosphere, trying to burrow into his mouth, nose, and pores. However, the moment it touched the golden light on his body, it made a chi-chi sound, blocked outside. Divine sense was emitted, but it was severely interfered with by the gray mist, only able to probe 10 feet around. He clenched his fists. Dark red evil spirit flashed away at his fingertips. That was the fur of the killing Tao principles he had gained from the god-slaying spear's remnant. He opened his steps, and walked toward the depths of the forest, the direction Hutu had mentioned. The forest was silent, only the sound of his own footsteps and the occasional sound of stepping on broken branches. Walking for about a stick of incense time, the mist in front seemed thicker. Suddenly, a blurry black shadow quietly pounced from behind a huge pitch-black ancient tree to the side, carrying a pungent fishy wind and sharp hissing sound, aiming straight for Meng Chuan's back of the neck. Meng Chuan didn't even look back. Mana surging in his body, he punched backwards. On the fist edge, golden mana condensed, faintly with the sound of wind and thunder. Bang! In the muffled sound, the black shadow flew back at a faster speed, crashing into several bole-thick branches, and fell into the pile of rotten leaves, twitching twice, and stopped moving. Meng Chuan then turned to look. It was a monster shaped like a civet cat, but with bat wings and a bone tail, completely pitch black, its eye sockets hollow. At this moment its chest was deeply sunken, leaking black-green foul-smelling liquid. Essence spawned from Yin and filth. Meng Chuan frowned. This thing's strength is not strong, but the aura is strange, obviously good at hiding and sneak attacks. If I didn't have keen spiritual perception, and had the mysterious technique to protect my body, I would definitely suffer from that hit just now. At the same time, in the grey mist all around, dense scarlet light lit up. The strange sound that made one's teeth ache came from all directions. The grey mist churned violently. Shadows of various shapes, emitting Yin and filth dead aura, slowly appeared, surrounding him in the center. Meng Chuan stood straight, looking around at the increasing number of monsters, his eyes calm. He twisted his neck, bones making cracking sounds. His right hand virtually grasped. A wisp of dark red evil spirit oozed from his fingertips, entwining and circling. Fine, he whispered. I'll use you as a whetstone to grind the sharp edge of my spear. The grey mist churned. Scarlet light points layered on top of each other. Hissing sounds seemed to form a tide. Meng Chuan stood in the center, slowly adjusting his breath. The golden lake in his dantian surging, the faint golden light halo on his body flowing, distinct from the surrounding Yin and filth dead aura. He opened his 5 fingers of his right hand, and slowly gripped them again. The dark red evil spirit swimming like a spiritual snake on his fingertips, emitting a pure and brutal killing intent. Roar! Directly in front, a monster shaped like a rotten giant bear, but with 3 twisted heads, could no longer restrain itself, carrying a fishy wind and black mist. It pounced. Wherever it passed, rotten leaves flew, leaving scorched black claw marks on the ground. Meng Chuan exerted force under his feet. His figure did not dodge, instead rushed out, right fist retracted at his waist, golden mana surging and gathering, even more so with a wisp of dark red evil spirit entwined on it, condensing into a dazzling red light point on the fist edge. Just the moment the monster's sharp claws were about to hit, he twisted his waist and sent his shoulders, and punched straight out, without any fancy moves, only the condensed extreme power, and that origin from the god-slaying spears, most primitive killing essence. Bang! Pfft! The fist penetrated the head in the middle. Dark red evil spirit instantly erupted, like a red-hot branding iron stabbing into ice and snow. The monster's roar stopped abruptly, its huge body stiffened suddenly, and then, with the fist edge as the center, dark red cracks spread over its whole body like a spider web. Boom! The monster exploded, turning into grey ash drifting all over the sky. A wisp of dead evil aura, several times purer than before, tried to escape, but was rolled by the dark red evil spirit remaining on Meng Chuan's fist edge, and swallowed clean. The golden energy vortex in his dantian shook slightly, actually condensing a bit. Killing can actually feed back to oneself. This discovery made Meng Chuan's eyes look cold. Hiss! The surrounding monsters seemed to be angered, or stimulated by that pure killing aura, swarmed over like a tide. Claws, bone tails, poisonous saliva, Yin wind, various attacks, shrouded from all directions. Meng Chuan moved, his figure turning into a swift faint golden stream of light, shuttling through the monster crowd. Fists, elbows, knees, legs, his whole body turned into weapons. The strong flesh tempered by the 9 turns mysterious technique, assisted by earth immortal peak mana, and the increasingly skilled killing evil spirit. Every collision, a monster would crumble into ash. He was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep, invincible. But the monsters seemed endless, constantly emerging from the depths of the grey mist. They were fearless, only having the instinct to swallow living beings. What was more tricky was, their attacks contained Yin and filth dead aura, constantly eroding the protective golden light, trying to contaminate his mana and blood. The Xuanwu scale on his chest continued to emit a cool aura, protecting his spiritual platform and heart pulse. But the consumption of flesh and mana was not small. Meng Chuan just smashed a flying yiksha-like monster with a punch, but his left shoulder was scratched by a tail hook of another burrowing corpse worm. The wound was not deep, but it instantly turned into a pitch-black color. The cold and painful feeling spread. His movements could not help but lag. With this instantaneous delay, 4 or 5 monsters took the opportunity to pounce. Sharp teeth fishy wind shrouded. At a critical moment, fierce color flashed in Meng Chuan's eyes, no longer holding back. The golden lake in his dantian roared, mobilizing almost all the mana in his body, together with the killing evil spirit he had gained from observing the god-slaying spear, erupted instantly. "Get out," he roared. His arms vibrated, and a ring-shaped air wave mixed with faint gold and dark red exploded with him as the center. The air wave passed. The pouncing monsters hit an invisible barrier, flying backwards one after another, their bodies cracking in mid-air, turning into flying ash. Within 10 feet, the gray mist was cleared, revealing the pitch-black and damp ground below. Meng Chuan panted slightly. The pitch-black wound on his left shoulder slowly drained black gas under the scouring of golden mana, and began to heal. This burst of consumption was not small, but the effect was also obvious. The surrounding monsters seemed to be intimidated. The offensive slowed down. The scarlet eyes were still staring at him, but hesitated and did not advance. He looked toward the depths of the forest, where the mist was thickest, vaguely visible outlines of collapsed buildings. A spiritual machine, different from the surrounding een and filth, pure and pure, was flickering like breathing. Spiritual treasure is right there. He must fight a quick battle. Dragging on. Mana exhausted, only relying on flesh power. Dangerous. Meng Chuan took a deep breath of the rotting air. His eyes turned completely cold, and then, he no longer pursued moves, pushing his speed to the limit, straight, rushing, towards the ancient temple direction. Those who block will be killed. The golden and dark red intertwined figure, turned into a death hurricane, slammed into the monster tide. Wherever it passed, corpses flew, ash permeated. He no longer dodged secondary attacks, only protecting his vitals, exchanging injuries for the path, opening the way with killing. His left arm added 3 more claw marks. His back was splashed with corrosive poisonous liquid, making chi-chi sounds, but his forward rush momentum did not diminish at all. Under his fists and feet, monsters crumbled one after another. The killing evil spirit became more condensed in continuous use, and the efficiency of swallowing evil to feed back to himself also improved subtly. Getting closer to the ancient temple, he could already see it was half a palace built of pale giant stones, collapsed half-side. The remaining half was also covered with pitch-black vines and moss. The temple door had long since disappeared. Only a pitch-black entrance remained. That pure spiritual machine was spreading from the entrance, and the monsters guarding the temple door were also completely different. They were 3 skeleton giant beasts that were obviously a circle larger. The skeletons were dark gold, the ghost fire burning in their eye sockets. The aura had reached the earth immortal level. Behind them, there were dozens of various evil objects with aura approaching the earth immortal level. Roar! The 3 skeleton giant beasts simultaneously emitted silent roars. The ghost fire flourished, stepping forward. The heavy footsteps made the ground tremble. Black frost where the cold dead aura condensed into substance, spreading on the ground. Meng Chuan stopped, his chest heaving, multiple wounds on his body, oozing pale golden blood, confronting the pitch-black dead aura. Mana had been exhausted by more than half, but his eyes were shining terrifyingly bright. He wiped a trace of blood from the corner of his mouth, suddenly smiled. Come, spitting out a word. He actually took the initiative to rush towards the 3 skeleton giant beasts. During the rush, his right hand 5 fingers formed claws, virtually grasping. The wisp of killing evil spirit in his dantian was mobilized to the extreme, actually faintly condensing a phantom of a broken spear tip full of cracks in his palm. Although it was virtual and indefinite, but the killing meaning of that destruction made the ghost fire in the 3 skeleton giant beasts' eye sockets jump violently involuntarily. The first skeleton giant beast waved a bone claw the size of a door panel and slapped down. The claw wind tore the air. Meng Chuan did not dodge. With the phantom spear tip in his palm, he stabbed straight into the center of the bone claw. Sichich! The phantom spear tip collided with the bone claw, making a sound that made one's teeth ache. The dark gold skeleton that was strong and comparable to refined gold was actually easily stabbed by the phantom spear tip, and then, dark red evil spirit spread along the phantom spear tip like cracks. The skeleton giant beast emitted a miserable soul howl, the whole bone arm instantly covered with dark red lines, exploding with a boom. The ghost fire also dimmed by more than half. Meng Chuan was shaken by the countershock force, causing his blood to boil, but he borrowed this force, his figure flickering like a ghost, avoiding the bite of another giant beast, appearing under the ribs of the 3rd giant beast. He clenched his left hand into a fist, wrapped in golden mana, and fiercely smashed at the joint of its spine. Crack! A crisp bone-breaking sound rang out. At the same time, he did not look back, backhanded and threw the phantom spear tip that was about to dissipate towards the head of the 2nd beast. The phantom entered its eye socket ghost fire. Clatter! The ghost fire suddenly expanded, and then extinguished like a punctured balloon. The beast skeleton scattered on the ground with a clatter. In a flash of lightning, 3 earth immortal level skeleton giant beasts, one crippled, one destroyed, one seriously injured. The strong evil objects approaching around were all intimidated for a moment by this brave and unparalleled evil spirit surging fighting method. Taking this opportunity, Meng Chuan did not hesitate, burning the remaining mana in his dantian, bringing his speed to the limit, turning into a stream of light, through the gap of the broken-armed giant beast, straight into the pitch-black temple door. Angry roars and chasing wind sounds came from behind, but he had already grabbed the first step, stepping into the temple. The view in front darkened. Following that, his gaze fell into the depths of the temple. On the broken altar, clear radiance flowed like water, illuminating the square inch of land. In the center of the light, something was quietly suspended. It was a square bucket-shaped object that looked like gold but was not not gold, looked like jade but was not jade, simple and unadorned, yet it had the Tao rhyme of wholeness, containing everything. The pure light passed, filth dissipated, evil objects retreated. At just a glance, Meng Chuan recognized this object, and his pupils contracted sharply at this moment. Hun, primordial golden dough container. This spiritual treasure was definitely not as simple as passable grade in Huda's words. This primordial golden dough was a supreme innate spiritual treasure, one of the top treasures conceived when heaven and earth were first opened. Infinite power, wondrous and extraordinary. In the period of investiture of the gods, the primordial golden dough was a treasure given to the three Shao ladies by the upper pure Tongtian sect master, one of the three pure ones. The three Shao had once used this bucket to successively capture Luya Taoist and Yang Jian, taking away the 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect and many disciples, eventually even shocking the saint to come down in person. In his memory, this spiritual treasure first arrived in Hongjuan's hands, and later was placed by him on the Fenbao rock. Obtained by Tong Tian, he could be considered to have cut Hongjuan's path, thinking it should be his transmigration here, causing a butterfly effect, resulting in Huda discovering this treasure first. He never expected the so-called experience pointed out by Huda. The opportunity given at will was actually a supreme innate spiritual treasure that could make prehistoric great powers fight to the death. His heart was beating uncontrollably, mixed with the exhaustion of surviving a disaster, incredulous shock, and a trace of scorching heat. The surprise was too big, so big that it was dizzying, but the monster's roars outside the temple were already close at hand. The shadows completely swallowed the entrance. The fishy wind poured into the temple first. Meng Chuan shook his head violently, forcibly suppressing the surging emotions. The mana in his dantian was nearly exhausted, meridians empty and painful, but in his limbs and bones, the surging blood energy tempered by the first turn of the 9 turns mysterious technique was still surging. The power contained in the tendons and skin was still condensed. Mana exhaustion was a taboo for cultivators, causing him to lose magical powers. Difficult to fight for a long time, but this flesh body was still a solid earth immortal peak physique. He took a deep breath, the chest heaving. A low sinking roar like thunder came from the depths of the flesh and blood. The wounds contaminated by yin and filth dead aura on his body, under the spontaneous wriggling of flesh and blood, were slowly squeezing out black gas. Pale golden blood emitting vitality began to heal. No time to be shocked, no time to think carefully. Meng Chuan's gaze locked on the clear light on the altar. Taking a step forward, bang! The stone slab on the ground exploded with fine cracks. Without using mana, purely relying on the explosion of flesh power, he was like an arrow from a string, shooting toward the primordial golden dough. The speed, although not as fast as a stream of light in full mana, but still faster than a galloping horse, carrying an unstoppable and barbaric momentum. Behind, in the shadow of the temple entrance, that broken-armed skeleton giant beast had already squeezed in half a body. The ghost fire locked onto his back. More evil objects swarmed in. Fishy wind and dead aura instantly permeated the hall. Meng Chuan turned a deaf ear to the crisis behind him. In his eyes only the gradually approaching clear light. 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet. The moment his fingertips were about to touch the warm clear light. Roar! The skeleton giant beast's intact bone arm, carrying a miserable wind, swept down fiercely from behind him like a huge bone hammer. Wherever it passed, air exploded. The rotten pillars scraped by the fierce wind made a rustle sound of falling dust. Dodge, then abandon all efforts. Falling into the siege. Not dodge. Resist this attack hard. Even with the earth immortal flesh, he would inevitably be injured, or even slapped away, losing the opportunity to seize the treasure. In a flash of lightning, fierce color like blood in Meng Chuan's eyes, he did not dodge. The forward rush momentum did not decrease but increase, at the same time twisting his waist and turning his crotch, putting all his strength, will, and even the last wisp of potential in the depths of his exhausted mana, poured into his right fist. The fist edge without light, yet heavy as a mountain. Faint golden patterns appeared under the skin, facing the huge bone arm that swept over. Not defend but attack. Punch hard. Attack against attack. Strong against strong. 9 turns mysterious technique. When was it ever afraid of a head-on collision? Fist bone and giant arm collided violently. Dong! A muffled sound to the extreme exploded in the hall. The air wave visible to the naked eye scattered in a ring, shaking the temple roof and making dust fall. The huge momentum of the skeleton giant beast's forward rush actually paused for a moment. On that dark gold bone arm comparable to refined gold, with the fist impact point as the center, a fine dense crack exploded. Meng Chuan was shaken violently, sweetness in his throat, forcibly swallowing the surging blood, borrowing the countershock force of the collision. His figure spun sharply like a top, unloading most of the impact. At the same time his left arm reached out like a spiritual snake, 5 fingers spread, with a sense of resolution, grabbing at the primordial golden dough flowing with clear light on the altar. Spiritual treasure in hand. Warm, condensed, clear spirit chi surged into his arm, cleansing fatigue, suppressing surging blood. At the same time, a vast, ancient, all-encompassing spiritual treasure Tao rhyme rushed into his sea of consciousness along the contact. Behind, the skeleton giant beast emitted an angry, painful howl. More evil objects swarmed to pounce. The fishy wind claw had already touched the clothes on his back. Meng Chuan held the primordial golden dough, turned around fiercely, blocking it in front front of him, looking at the surging darkness tide, his mouth grinning with a bloody, fierce arc. Next, either borrow this supreme innate spiritual treasure, to turn the tables in a desperate situation, or be completely swallowed by this filth together with it. The wind sound of the bone arm sweeping, the fishy smell of the evil objects pouncing, the moment Meng Chuan held the primordial golden dough, were separated outside an invisible barrier. The so-called barrier was the clear light flowing spontaneously from this simple square bucket in his hand, spreading like water. Wherever it passed, the een and filth dead aura melted like ice and snow meeting the sun, chi dissipating. The evil objects that pounced the closest hit the clear light, without being able to make a sound of misery, turned into green smoke and scattered. The bone claw of the broken-armed skeleton giant beast that swung halfway, stiffened hard at the edge of the clear light. The ghost fire jumped wildly, actually revealing instinctual fear. Not daring to advance even an inch, Meng Chuan knelt on one knee by the altar, left hand supporting the ground, right hand tightly gripping the primordial golden dough, gasping heavily, pale golden blood spilling from the corners of his mouth, staining the pale stone slab, staining a small piece of damp mark. The mana in his body was nearly exhausted, meridians empty and painful. Only the golden energy vortex deep in his dantian was still rotating stubbornly, spitting out the warm and peaceful clear spirit chi transmitted from the primordial golden dough. This aura was completely different from the Yonghard mana generated by his cultivation of the 9 turns mysterious technique, softer, thicker, like the earth nourishing, all things growing. Wherever it passed, the surging blood was smoothed, the stubborn een and filth dead aura in the wound was pulled out bit by bit, purified. He looked down at the object in his hand, the square bucket, simple, not gold not jade, warm to the touch, with natural Tao patterns flowing on the surface. Looking at it carefully, those lines seemed to be changing constantly, sometimes like clouds and water, sometimes like stars, all-encompassing, whole. Just holding it like this made him feel peace of mind, no miscellaneous thoughts. In the period of investiture of the gods, it was this supreme innate spiritual treasure that once cut off the top 3 flowers of the 12 golden immortals of the Chan sect, closing the 5 chi in their chests, with fierce power. But at this moment, holding it in his hand, he only felt it was neutral and peaceful, without half a trace of murderous aura. The hall was silent for a moment, clear light shrouding the space of 3 feet with Meng Chuan as the center. Outside was the churning gray-black mist, and the dense scarlet eyeballs. The evil objects growled uneasily, but none dared to cross the thunder pool even a step. The skeleton giant beast's ghost fire flickered, slowly withdrew its bone arm, retreated 2 steps, actually turned to squeeze away the evil objects at the temple entrance, stepped with heavy steps, and disappeared into the depths of the mist. The head retreated, and the remaining evil objects were even more restless. Not long after, all retreated with the mist. Only Meng Chuan was left in the hall, and the eyesore. Meng Chuan then relaxed the breath he had been holding, sliding and sitting on the ground with his back against the cold altar. The primordial golden dough's clear light did not dissipate, still quietly suspended 3 inches above his palm, casting a gentle halo, protecting this square inch of land. Meng Chuan closed his eyes to see inside. The injury was not light. Left shoulder, back. The right arm had been eroded by the een and filth dead aura in many places, pale golden flesh and pitch-black dead aura confronting. Mana nearly exhausted, the dantian vortex rotated slowly, but the flesh foundation tempered by the 9 turns mysterious technique was extremely solid. The blood energy was still surging, cooperating with the clear spirit chi transmitted by the primordial golden dough, bit by bit polishing away and expelling the filth in his body. Greater change, in the sea of consciousness, when he held the golden bucket, the moment the vast Tao rhyme rushed in, countless broken images and information poured in along with it. At the beginning of heaven and earth, clear and turbid separated, there was a wisp of innate primordial chi feeling heaven and earth, conceived in a spiritual point at the een of Buzhou mountain, passing through immeasurable quantities of kulpas, finally becoming this bucket. The day the bucket was formed, heaven descended mysterious yellow, earth surged golden lotus. There were 3 innate divine prohibitions naturally generated, containing the wonderful principles of primordiality, containment, purification. This treasure did not master killing, did not specialize in attacking, but contained a prototype of a small world conceived internally, could contain all things, could return to the origin, could purify all evil, and because it contained a wisp of innate primordial chi, it had great help for the practitioner to realize the state of primordial wholeness. Meng Chuan opened his eyes, his gaze complex. This primordial golden dough actually had such an origin. Thinking of the 4 words, passable grade, from the mouth of the barefoot hemp-clothed girl, he shook his head and smiled bitterly, warmth flowing in his heart. This spiritual treasure, even in the eyes of the ancestor witch, was definitely not ordinary. This cause and effect was really not small. Regardless, she dared to invest in him. He would not let her lose. He took a deep breath, his attention withdrawing from the spiritual treasure. The most important thing right now was to heal his injuries as soon as possible, and initially refine this treasure. Meng Chuan endured the pain of meridians, reoperating the 9 turns mysterious technique. This time, he tried to guide the clear spirit chi transmitted spontaneously by the primordial golden dough to merge with his own cultivation method. Time passed quietly. Prehistoric does not remember years. No sun and moon in the hall, only the golden bucket's clear light flowing endlessly. I don't know how much time passed, when the last wisp of een and filth dead aura was forced out of his body, turning into black smoke and dissipating in the clear light. Meng Chuan's whole body shook. Inside the dantian, that lake of gold that had already overflowed to the extreme, boiled instantly. At the center of the lake, a ray of pure to the extreme, bright to the extreme light exploded, like the morning sun rising, instantly sweeping through the entire dantian. The golden lake was completely ignited by this light, beginning to shrink violently, condense, sublimate, qualitatively change. At the same time, Meng Chuan's flesh body was also undergoing earth-shaking changes. Faint golden patterns under the skin became more clear, bones emitting jade-like luster, 5 internal organs resonating and trembling under the scouring of blood energy, emitting low Tao sounds, the sound of blood running, like a surging river. Deep in the bone marrow came a newborn-like light sound. 9 turns mysterious technique, second turn, a matter of course. Boom! The invisible barrier was completely broken through. Meng Chuan's aura climbed steadily, faint golden light halo permeating from the body, echoing with the primordial golden doe's clear light. The nature of the mana in his body was completely changed, purer, more condensed, carrying a fresh Tao rhyme echoing with heaven and earth, heavenly immortal. He opened his eyes, golden runes flashing deep in his pupils, slowly stood up, clenched his fists. Power was completely different. If at the earth immortal level, mana was like a stream, flesh was like mortal iron, then at this moment, mana was like a river, flesh was like 100 refined gold. As he moved, the induction with heaven and earth spiritual energy was 10 times clearer, as if he could trigger the wind and clouds by lifting his hand. He looked at the primordial golden doe that was still suspended in front of him. His mind moved slightly. This time, it was no longer passively accepting its clear chi nourishment, but actively sending a wisp of pure heavenly immortal mana, slowly into the golden bucket. The golden bucket trembled slightly, surface Tao patterns flowing accelerated, clear light flourished, a faint yet clear induction came from the depths of the golden bucket, establishing a vague connection with the mana he sent, and his own primordial spirit. Until this point, he could be considered to have initially refined this spiritual treasure. Meng Chuan's mind moved again. The primordial golden doe turned into a stream of clear light, sinking into his brow heart, sinking into the sea of consciousness to be nourished. The clear light in the hall dissipated, returning to darkness. Should go back. That person, perhaps, was still waiting in the valley. The moment he stepped out of the temple door, the gray mist in the forest seemed to have consciousness and retreated to both sides, consciously making way. In the distance, vaguely, scarlet eyeballs were flickering in the depths of the mist, but none dared to come near. Meng Chuan did not look back. Heavenly immortal mana turned slightly, taking a step forward. His figure was already at the distance. Then a few more steps, and he completely disappeared at the edge of the forest. The moment he stepped out of the gray mist forest, the daylight shone brightly. The rich innate spiritual energy like pulp surged into his mouth and nose, swallowed and refined by the golden energy vortex in his dantian, turned into pure mana, nourishing all his limbs and bones. Heavenly immortal and earth immortal were already like clouds and mud. It was not just a leap of mana total and quality, but also the initial transformation of the life level. Should go back. He identified the direction. Mana flowing in his body, lightly stepping with his feet. Bang! His figure shot out like an arrow from a string, speed several times faster than when he came. The time spent returning was only less than half of when he came. That familiar valley entrance was already in sight soon. The valley entrance array brilliance remained the same, no different from when he left. Meng Chuan pressed the cloud head, falling at the valley entrance, slightly tidying his torn clothes, the sleeve edge torn by colliding with the skeleton giant beast, the front of the clothes also stained with some dark brown blood that had already dried. He lifted his hand, fingertip touching the array light curtain. The light curtain rippled like water, quietly dividing a gap. Stepping in, the scene in the valley remained the same. Blue pool clear, ancient trees lush, the crooked neck tree casting shadows by the pool, the scent of grass and trees in the air intertwined with faint spiritual mist, peaceful and harmonious, totally different from the vast and rough outside world. Huta was not on the blue stone by the pool. Meng Chuan's gaze swept over, falling under the crooked neck tree. There was an extra simple stone table at some point, 2 stone benches, a clay jar on the table, 2 clay bowls, and a few red fruits piled beside it. He walked over, sat on the stone bench. The clay jar was filled with clear water, clear and sweet, should be taken from the pool water. He poured a bowl, drinking slowly. His gaze, however, falling on the pool surface. The water was like a mirror, reflecting the cyan gray sky, and his reflection in the water that had changed completely from 3 months ago. Back. The voice came from behind, calm without waves. Meng Chuan put down the clay bowl, stood up, turned his head. The girl was still barefoot in hemp clothes, walking slowly from the depths of the valley. She was carrying a few large green leaves in her hand, carrying some newly picked berries and tubers that Meng Chuan could not name. Thanks to Senior's blessing. Meng Chuan bowed. Huta walked to the stone table, put down the leaves. Her gaze swept over him, staying on the torn sleeve and blood-stained clothes for a moment, then falling back on his face. Heavenly Immortal. She spoke. Meng Chuan responded softly. She paused, looked at him. Got the object? Meng Chuan nodded. His mind moved slightly. The primordial golden dough floated from his brow heart, turning to its original size, suspended above the stone table. Clear light flowing. Dao rhyme forming naturally, illuminating the surroundings several feet in a clear and lively way. Huda's action of gnawing the fruit stopped. She looked at the simple square bucket, looked for a long time, only then slowly swallowing the fruit in her mouth. Primordial golden dough. She spat out 4 words slowly. She really recognized it. To this point, Meng Chuan finally confirmed. This treasure was specifically arranged for him by the other party. Huda changed the subject, asked, since you have broken through to Heavenly Immortal, and got this treasure, what do you plan to do next? Meng Chuan pondered. His original plan was to continue to practice hard in the valley, until breaking through to true immortal, mysterious immortal, owning a certain degree of self-protection power, before going out to travel, seeking opportunities to break through to golden immortal. His primary goal at this stage was to listen to the Tao in Xianxia Palace, which was also a great opportunity in the prehistoric world at this time. Cannot be missed. Hongjun borrowed 3 lectures at Xianxia Palace, accumulating great Tao merit, merging with the heavenly Tao. He going to listen to the Tao could also be considered giving the other party face. However, 3 lectures at Xianxia Palace, each threshold was higher than the last. In memory, there were 2 sayings. One said the minimum threshold for all 3 lectures was Great Luo Golden Immortal. The other said, first lecture minimum Golden Immortal, second lecture Tai Golden Immortal, third lecture Great Luo Golden Immortal. He hoped the latter was accurate. After all, wanting to certify Great Luo before the first lecture in Xianxia Palace, for him, was definitely a hell-level difficulty. Junior plans to continue to retreat, stabilize the realm, refine the mysterious technique and spiritual treasure. Meng Chuan said truthfully, closing the door to build a car. Cannot practice real ability. Huda shook her head. After Heavenly Immortal, practice is no longer just accumulating mana, but more about heart state comprehension. Tao method verification. The prehistoric is vast. Opportunities are countless. Dangers are countless. Walk out. See heaven and earth. See all living beings. Also see yourself. That is the right path. She paused, said, at the foot of Buzhou Mountain, 10,000 miles east, there is an ancient battlefield relic, left by the 100 clans' hegemony in the ancient times. The killing aura there is soaring to the sky. Maybe it has some benefits for your killing Tao principles. You can go there and walk around. Consider it an experience. Meng Chuan bowed. Many thanks, senior. Don't be in a hurry to thank me. Huda took a dark yellow bone piece from her bosom, slightly different from the one she gave before, with more complex patterns on it. This is the token of our witch clan. Carry it with you. The ancient battlefield is close to Buzhou Mountain, often with witch clan children patrolling and experiencing. If you encounter danger, or have things to ask, can use this to seek their help. She pushed the bone piece over. However, most of the witch clan children have straight temperaments, do not like to beat around the bush. You treat them with sincerity, they will naturally respond to you with sincerity. Meng Chuan solemnly accepted it. Junior will remember. Sit, eat. Huda pushed the berries and tubers over a little, took a piece of unknown tuber herself, crack, bit into it, chewing crisp. Meng Chuan sat down, learned her way, took a berry. The fruit taste was sour and sweet. The juice was full. After entering the abdomen, it turned into gentle spiritual energy and dispersed. The 2 of them, with clear water, quietly finished this simple meal. The sun through the branches and leaves of the crooked neck tree, sprinkled dappled light spots. The pool water silent, occasionally fish jumping on the water surface, splashing fine ripples. After eating, Huda wiped the crumbs off her hands, stood up. I need to leave for a period of time, she said. Meng Chuan looked up at her. Something happened in the clan. Need to return to the Buzhou Mountain ancestral land. Huda was concise and comprehensive. Short then a few months, long then a few years. I will maintain the valley array. You can enter and exit freely, but after leaving the valley, need to be careful in everything. She paused, looked at Meng Chuan, suddenly smiled slightly. The smile was very faint, but made her whole face become bright and vivid in an instant. Don't die, she said. I'm still waiting to see. You who practice Father God's 9 turns mysterious technique, can go to what step in the end. As the words fell, her figure was already like a reflection in the water, fading slowly, finally dissipating into the air, leaving only the green leaves on the stone table, and a few fruit cores remaining between the leaves, proving she existed. Meng Chuan sat on the stone bench, remaining motionless for a long time. He lowered his head, looking at the bone piece in his palm, warm and heavy. In the distance, the pool water reflected the sky and clouds, silent as before. He kept the bone piece close to his body, stood up, and came to the pool. Under the water surface, that pitch-black god-slaying spear remnant was still stuck in the sand, dark red blood light flowing slowly in the depths of the cracks, fierce and silent. Meng Chuan stared for a moment, turned around and walked back under the crooked neck tree, sitting cross-legged on the blue stone, closing his eyes and concentrating. 9 turns mysterious technique operated. Heavenly immortal mana like a surging river, endless. In the sea of consciousness, primordial golden dough clear light scattered, nourishing the primordial spirit, stabilizing the Tao base. 3 days later, Meng Chuan opened his eyes, golden light flashing in his pupils. He stood up, looked at this peaceful valley for the last time, then turned, strode toward the valley entrance. The array brilliant separated, and closed silently behind him. Outside the valley, the prehistoric heaven and earth vast, wind rolling dust. He identified the direction, mana flowing in his body. Taking a step forward, his figure turned into a faint golden stream of light, galloping toward the direction of Buzhou Mountain. Behind him, the valley moved away, until disappearing at the end of the horizon. Buzhou Mountain is closer than Meng Chuan imagined, or rather, it is a closeness that cannot be measured by distance. When he flew towards that direction for about 3 days, a hazy gray shadow connecting heaven and earth appeared at the end of his vision. The gray shadow occupied most of the horizon, the upper end disappearing into the thick chaotic-colored clouds, while the lower end merged seamlessly with the earth, as if it were supporting the firmament of the entire prehistoric world. The closer he got, the more distinct that indescribable, heavy pressure originating from the depths of his bloodline became. Buzhou Mountain, transformed from Pangu's spine, the pillar of the prehistoric heavens. He pressed down his escape light, landing on the top of a reddish hill, looking out into the distance. As far as his eyes could see, the earth presented a strange and distinct division. Approaching the direction of Buzhou Mountain, it was a vast mountain forest of deep dark green, ancient trees reaching the sky, spiritual mist lingering, full of vitality, almost barbaric. In the area spanning tens of thousands of miles closer to himself, however, it was a completely different scene. Brownish-red soil, charred and cracked, almost no complete vegetation could be seen. Spiritual energy in the air was chaotic, sometimes violent like a tide, sometimes thin like gauze, and there was dark red evil spirit permeating the entire area, flowing on the surface of the earth like a light mist, gathering and dispersing unpredictably. The ancient battlefield, the relic of the ancient 100 clans hegemony, the place where countless living beings perished. Even after an unknown amount of time, the remaining aura of slaughter, resentment, and broken Tao principles, still turned this land into a forbidden zone for life. Meng Chuan took a deep breath. At his chest, the Xuanwu scale gifted by Huda felt slightly cool, protecting his clarity of mind. He first found a relatively intact rock wall, sitting cross-legged in a leeward spot to adjust his breath for half a day, adjusting his state to the peak. Then, only then did he stand up and take the first step. The moment he stepped into the boundary line, he felt a gloominess that reached deep into his bones. A faint whimpering sound came from the wind, as if countless dead souls were speaking in his ears. The soil under his feet was soft, carrying a strange elasticity, as if stepping on a layer of piled-up remains that had not completely rotted. Continuing to move forward, the battlefield ruins were broader than imagined, and even more dead silent. He couldn't hear any insect chirps or bird calls, nor could he see any traces of living things, only jagged strange stones everywhere, giant bones half buried in the soil, and occasionally appearing, broken weapon fragments too ruined to recognize their original form. Those remains were mostly dark gold or jade white. Even after the erosion of time, they were still incomparably hard. Some were as huge as small hills, ribs like arches. One could imagine what kind of giant creatures they were when alive. Some were small and exquisite, the bones naturally possessing mysterious patterns, obviously belonging to certain gifted races. Meng Chuan stopped in front of a giant bone half buried in the soil, shaped like a bird, but possessing 3 heads. The remains were dark gold, with lightning-like charred black marks on the bone surface. The 3 heads facing 3 directions, jaws wide open, maintaining a roaring posture. In the 6 hollow eye sockets, it seemed as if there were still unwilling flames burning in the depths of time. He reached out, fingertips cautiously touching a wing bone. A cold, bone-chilling killing intent poured in along his fingertips in an instant. Fragments of scenes appeared in his mind, wings covering the sky and sun, thunder tearing the firmament, and a sword light that pierced heaven and earth, extremely dazzling. A moment later, the images stopped abruptly. Meng Chuan withdrew his finger. A small charred burn appeared on his fingertip. The will remaining from the master of the skeleton, after passing through eternity, actually had not completely dissipated. He remained silent for a moment, bowed respectfully to the skeleton, and then turned and left. The further he went, the thicker the evil spirit, and the denser the remains on the ground. At this time, some relatively complete architectural ruins began to appear. Collapsed giant stone hall pillars, broken relief city walls, bottomless tunnel entrances. Occasionally, evil spirit would condense into faint, twisted human-like phantoms, wandering unconsciously among the ruins, emitting silent wails. This was a battle soul formed by the obsession of the dead and the evil spirit, with incomplete intelligence, attacking approaching living beings purely on instinct. Meng Chuan avoided many areas where battle souls were dense, choosing to pass through the relatively open Rift Valley areas. But, what should come, could not be avoided after all. When passing by a stone forest composed of countless sharp stalagmites, the mist surged forward suddenly. 3 dark red phantoms floated out from behind the stalagmites, blocking his way. Their appearance barely maintained a human shape, or rather, they were prehistoric beings mimicking the body of the father god Pangu, a period known as the innate Tao body. At this time, Nuwa had not yet created humans. The prehistoric world had no human race. Even if there were humans, they were created by Nuwa according to the innate Tao body. However, these 3 guys had blurry facial features, their bodies constantly twisting and changing. glowing, dark red evil spirit flowing on their bodies. At their hollow eye sockets, 2 points of scarlet light stared fixedly at Meng Chuan, not concealing their craving for the essence blood of living beings. 3 battle souls, all with aura at the earth immortal peak. In this ancient battlefield environment, blessed by evil spirit, they might be more difficult to deal with than ordinary earth immortals from the outside world. Meng Chuan stopped, his right hand hanging naturally at his side, a wisp of dark red evil spirit quietly entwined at his fingertips. No conversation, no probing. The battle soul in the middle first emitted a sharp hiss. As its body moved, it turned into a scarlet blood shadow, pouncing straight at Meng Chuan's face. Wherever it passed, the air emitted a corrosive chi-chi sound. The other 2 battle souls pounced left and right at the same time, sealing Meng Chuan's space for evasion. Fierce color flashed in Meng Chuan's eyes, not retreating but advancing. His left foot stepped heavily on the ground, his body rushing forward like a cannonball. His right fist retracted at his waist, faint golden mana surging and condensing, even more so with a wisp of condensed dark red killing evil spirit entwined on the fist edge. Facing the blood shadow in the center, he punched out. Where the fist edge pointed, the air exploded in a ring of ripples visible to the naked eye. The battle soul actually did not dodge, letting the fist penetrate its chest condensed by mist. Bang! The killing evil spirit on the fist erupted, dark red light exploding inside the battle soul. The battle soul emitted a miserable howl, its body trembling violently, trying to expel the invading evil spirit. Meng Chuan's killing evil spirit originated from the god-slaying spear remnant, its essence far higher than the mixed evil spirit here, like boiling water pouring on snow, quickly eroding and melting the core of the battle soul. The sharp claws of the other 2 battle souls had already touched the clothes on Meng Chuan's back. Meng Chuan did not look back, his left arm sweeping horizontally backwards like an iron whip. Bang! Bang! 2 muffled sounds. 2 battle souls were swept away by giant force, crashing into and breaking several stalagmites, their bodies fluctuating violently, dimming significantly, and the battle soul directly in front had already, under the erosion of the killing evil spirit, emitted the last sound of unwillingness, and collapsed with a boom, turning into a ball of pure dark red evil spirit, as if intending to merge into heaven and earth again. Meng Chuan opened his mouth and inhaled. That ball of pure evil spirit, like a whale absorbing water, was swallowed into his belly in one gulp. The golden energy vortex in his dantian rotated, rolling it in, refining it rapidly. A wisp of pure mana was fed back, and even more so, a broken understanding of killing and death fused into his mind. Hutu was right. The evil spirit of this ancient battlefield indeed had benefits for comprehending killing Dao principles. He turned around, looking at the 2 battle souls that had climbed up again, fiercer than before. He licked his lips. In his eyes, dark red light flashed and disappeared. The battle ended quickly. 2 earth immortal level battle souls, in front of Meng Chuan, who had initially adapted to the ancient battlefield environment, did not pose much threat, especially after he let go and took the initiative to mobilize the killing evil spirit to fight the enemy. These battle souls condensed from evil spirit actually became the best tonic, swallowing the 3 balls of pure evil spirit after the battle souls collapsed. Meng Chuan could feel that his own control over that wisp of killing Dao principles had progressed quite a bit. He shook his wrists and continued forward, passing through the stone forest. The terrain in front began to sink. A vast basin appeared before his eyes. His gaze swept over, finally looking at a relatively complete ruin at the edge of the basin. That was a square stone palace that had collapsed more than half, built with some kind of bluestone. The style was simple and rough. In front of the palace door, 2 broken stone beast statues lay, their forms ferocious. Even if incomplete, they still emitted a faint pressure. A slightly hoarse voice of surprise came from the side and rear. Innate Dao body, merely a heavenly immortal, actually dares to break into the depths of the ancient battlefield alone. Meng Chuan stopped, turned around and looked. 30 feet away, on a cracked giant rock, an extra figure appeared at some point. This was a humanoid monster covered with dark green scales, with a ferocious lizard head, dragging a thick long tail behind it, about a zhang tall. Hands and feet were all sharp claws. Dark yellow vertical pupils were staring fixedly at Meng Chuan. A forked long tongue licked across the corner of his lips, revealing cold, sharp teeth. The other party's aura was obscure and cold, carrying an extremely rich fishy smell, cultivation far above his heavenly immortal level. In the lizard monster's hand, he held a bone-white bent hook, the hook edge glowing with a ghostly blue luster, obviously quenched with highly toxic poison. The aura sharp, at least an acquired spiritual treasure. Demon clan, or? Meng Chuan's heart moved, but his face remained calm. He clasped his fists and said politely, "Senior, Junior is passing through this place, unintentionally disturbing you. I will leave now." "Leave?" The lizard monster grinned, revealing a cruel smile. "Since you are here, don't leave. Your innate Dao body's flesh. The blood energy is actually quite vigorous, just right for this seat to have a snack, to supplement my essence and energy." As soon as the words fell, the figure disappeared from the spot. The next instant, the ghostly blue hook blade arrived through the air, fishy wind in his face, already reaching 3 feet in front of Meng Chuan's throat. The speed was fast, far exceeding those battle souls before. Meng Chuan's face changed, mana in his body erupted violently. 9 turns mysterious technique urged to the extreme. His figure retreated retreated violently. This was definitely the most terrifying enemy he had encountered since arriving in the prehistoric. In a hurry, his right hand fumbled at his waist. The green-skinned gourd gifted by Hutu, which had been hanging there, was fiercely thrown forward by him, slammed towards the trajectory of the hook blade. A trace of disdain flashed in the lizard monster's eyes. The hook blade's momentum did not decrease, easily splitting the gourd in two. The gourd exploded. The residual earth fire plasma inside spilled out violently. This witch clan's spiritual wine was nourishment for the witch clan and Meng Chuan, who practiced 9 turns mysterious technique with strong flesh. But for others, it was fierce and domineering magma. Chi. The ghostly blue hook blade touched the earth fire plasma, making a fierce corrosive sound. The ghostly light on the hook blade dimmed, and a few drops of wine splashed onto the scales on the lizard monster's arm, instantly burning out several charred black small holes. Ah! The lizard monster roared in pain. Its offensive couldn't help but slow down. Taking this gap, Meng Chuan had already retreated 10 feet. A clear light flashed at his brow heart. The primordial golden dough spun and flew out, suspended above his head, scattering a clear light screen to protect his whole body. He did not hesitate at all. The moment he sacrificed the golden bucket, his left hand had already reached into his bosom, gripping the second bone piece gifted by Hutu. Mana injected. The bone piece became slightly hot, spreading a faint induction to seek help from the nearby witch clan. The enemy in front was too terrifying, far from what he, this little heavenly immortal, could enemy. He even suspected that the other party was not a true immortal, one level higher than heavenly immortal, but highly likely a mysterious immortal. Soon, Meng Chuan's heart sank. The bone piece became hot, spreading a wisp of weak induction, but failed to seek help from afar. The evil spirit in this place was too rich, the interference too strong. The bone piece's ability to transmit messages was greatly suppressed. Innate spiritual treasure. The lizard monster had now seen the golden bucket above Meng Chuan's head. First startled, then the greed in its eyes skyrocketed, almost turning into substance. Ha ha ha, heaven helps me. A mere heavenly immortal, with abundant blood energy, actually carries such a heavy treasure. It is fated for this seat to obtain this opportunity today. He laughed wildly, no longer holding back. Mysterious immortal mana erupted violently. Dark green demon aura rose to the sky. The bone hook in his hand had ghostly blue light flourishing, turning into 3 huge hook shadows, sealing up, down, left, and right, tearing fiercely towards Meng Chuan. Mysterious immortal's full force blow, matched with the acquired spiritual treasure hook blade. The power was so strong, that the air around Meng Chuan seemed to solidify instantly. Can't dodge, can't block. Between life and death, fierce color flashed in Meng Chuan's eyes. He no longer tried to urge that bone piece. Instead, he took it back into his bosom. His right hand 5 fingers formed claws. The wisp of killing evil spirit in his body was urged to the extreme. Following the arm vein, it rushed into his chest. There, pasted with the black scale gifted by Hutu, containing a wisp of Xuanwu true water aura. Killing evil spirit. Extremely fierce and evil. Xuanwu true water. Extremely soft and pure. The two had different properties, even clashing with each other. At this moment, Meng Chuan fiercely impacted the Xuanwu scale with the killing evil spirit, exploding it directly. The Xuanwu scale on his chest shook violently. The wisp of Xuanwu true water aura inside was stimulated by the fierce evil spirit, instinctively erupting in resistance. The extremely soft water and the extremely fierce evil spirit collided violently on Meng Chuan's chest. The next instant, a gray-black ripple, with Meng Chuan's chest as the center, spread out fiercely. The ripple bypassed Meng Chuan. Wherever it passed, space seemed to be distorted. The 3 ghostly blue hook shadows and dark green demon aura coming toward him hit an invisible embankment like crashing into it. The speed slowed down sharply. The light dimmed. The lizard monster's face changed greatly. He felt that his mind connection with the bone hook was rapidly weakening. The mana he threw out was also rapidly melted by that strange ripple. What kind of magical power is this? He was both shocked and angry. And Meng Chuan, the moment he detonated the scale, groaned, blood overflowing from the corners of his mouth. The Xuanwu scale completely turned into flying ash. Most of the power bypassed Meng Chuan, but there was still a little bit of residual force that landed on his chest, leaving a mass of bloody mess. If not for his strong flesh body, he would have died from this hit. And what he sought was this momentary opportunity. Meng Chuan's primordial golden dough above his head shook violently. The bucket mouth turned, aiming at the lizard monster who hadn't reacted yet. Clear light surging. Collect. Meng Chuan roared low, injecting the remaining half of the mana in his body, without reservation, into the golden bucket. Even if it was a supreme innate spiritual treasure, with his heavenly immortal cultivation, it was absolutely impossible to collect a mysterious immortal. He knew this point clearly, so he only sought interference and containment. The primordial golden dough's clear light turned into a condensed light pillar, covering the lizard monster. Dao Rime flowed in the light pillar. Although far from exerting its power due to Meng Chuan's lack of cultivation, it still made the lizard monster's figure lag, the demon aura in its body operating with a very short obscurity. It is now. Meng Chuan didn't look at the result at all. At the same time he urged the golden bucket. He had already burned his essence blood, performing the escape technique mentioned in 9 turns mysterious technique that caused great damage to the flesh. Blood shadow escape. His whole person turned into a blurry blood shadow. In a hurry, he slammed into the collapsed bluestone palace to the side. Bang! Stone chips flew. The wall was knocked into a huge hole. Following that, Meng Chuan's figure disappeared into it, vanishing without a trace. Roar! The lizard monster dispelled the influence of the golden bucket. After coming to its senses, emitted an angry roar, the sound shaking the four directions, causing the thick evil spirit in the center of the basin to churn. It never expected, a mere heavenly immortal, could actually escape from its hands, and even in front of it, escape into that stone palace that it had not dared to explore deeply before because of fear of the evil spirit. Good, good, good. It laughed out of anger, killing intent boiling in its vertical pupils. This seat was originally quite fearful of this palace, but now with an innate spiritual treasure inside, it is worth this seat taking a risk. The next moment, it walked towards the stone palace, probing the way with divine sense, approaching step by step. The stone palace, shrouded in thick evil spirit, had an exaggerated suppression of divine sense, only able to shroud the area around its body. Inside the stone palace, pitch black, Meng Chuan leaned against the cold wall, coughing blood slowly. The injury on his chest was hideous. In the bloody mess, he could see pale golden bones. The mana in his body was nearly exhausted, meridians torn in many places. What was more tricky was forcibly urging blood shadow escape, causing severe loss of essence blood. Bursts of weakness surged like a tide, making his consciousness gradually blur. He barely managed to lift his hand, wiping the blood from the corners of his mouth, taking out the bone piece gifted by Hutu from his bosom. The bone piece was warm, but the induction past was weak, and there were no signs of rescue approaching. Miscalculated. Meng Chuan pulled the corners of his mouth, putting away the bone piece. Outside the palace, the lizard monster was obviously approaching step by step. Strong enemy in front, no retreat behind. Injuries heavy, mana exhausted. This time, it was truly a desperate situation. If he really couldn't hold on, he could only crush the first bone piece she gifted. Hutu gifted him 2 bone pieces. The first one could enter the witch clan ancestral land. Crushing it could seek help from Hutu herself. The second one was what he used just now, could seek help from nearby witch clan. Meng Chuan struggled to sit straight, operating 9 turns mysterious technique, mobilizing the remaining mana in his dantian, cooperating with the surging blood energy, starting to slowly repair the injuries on his chest, suppressing the chaotic energy machine in his body. At the same time, the primordial golden dough flew out from his brow heart, suspended above his head, scattering clear light to help him stabilize his soul, purifying the mixed evil spirit and demon poison left by the lizard monster that had invaded his body. However, his injuries were really too heavy. That bloody mess on his chest was the dual consequence of the detonation of the Xuanwu scale, and the backlash of killing evil spirit, not only injuring tendons and bones, but also faintly damaging the heart pulse. Every heartbeat brought tearing pain. The weakness caused by essence blood loss made his consciousness gradually blur even more. Just when he was prepared to crush the first bone piece gifted by Hutu, to seek help from Hutu, boom! Outside the palace, without warning, came a deafening loud noise. Following closely, was the lizard monster's roar of shock and anger, and the muffled collision of some heavy object slamming into the ground. Who, you are? Ah! The scream stopped abruptly. Then, was an unsettling dead silence. Meng Chuan used his last strength to look up, looking towards the hole he had knocked open. A series of footsteps, heavy, neat, making a rustling sound on the gravel and sand, coming towards the stone palace. Meng Chuan's heart tightened, subconsciously clenching his fists, but didn't even have the strength to lift his arms. The next moment, the dim light cast from outside the hole was completely blocked by several tall and burly figures. The light outlined their distinct silhouettes, all over a zhang tall, shoulders wide and backs thick, muscles bulging, full of primitive and violent power. They wrapped simple animal skins. Exposed skin was copper-colored, full of hideous scars. The leader was the tallest, almost reaching the collapsed broken dome of the stone palace. In his hand he carried a bone hammer the size of a door panel, covered with sharp spikes. The hammer head still stained with dark green, viscous blood that was chi-chi, corroding the bone quality. It was precisely the blood of the lizard monster just now. Several people stood outside the hole, blocking the light, and also bringing suffocating pressure. But the bone piece on Meng Chuan's chest, at this moment, became scorching hot. It's the witch clan. The clear induction from Hutu's bone piece, and the blood energy fluctuations from these people that were the same source as Hutu, but more rough and violent, made Meng Chuan instantly identify their identities. Inside, the tall witch clan leader spoke, voice like muffled thunder. He lowered his head to look at the bone hammer in his hand, then looked at Meng Chuan, who was slumped on the ground inside the hole, covered in blood, frowning, still alive. Beside him, a slightly shorter witch clan member with a vertical scar on his face, poked his head in to take a look. Aura is very weak, injured not lightly. Hutu's token. The third witch clan member, holding a stone axe, pointed to Meng Chuan's bosom. There, the bone piece was emitting a unique fluctuation that only witch clan people could sense. The tall witch clan leader nodded, took a step, bent over and walked in from the hole. The interior of the stone palace was slightly low for him. He had to lower his head to enter. He walked to Meng Chuan, squatted down. Those copper bell-like eyes stared at Meng Chuan for 2 seconds, then looked at the primordial golden dough hanging above his head. Clear light, dim, innate spiritual treasure. He raised his eyebrows, but there was no greed in his eyes, only a trace of surprise. No wonder could hold on until this this time. He reached out, the palm thick and rough, full of calluses, grabbed Meng Chuan's wrist. Meng Chuan subconsciously wanted to break free, but was unable to move. A burning, violent, yet neutral and peaceful thick blood energy force rushed into Meng Chuan's body along his wrist. Wherever this force passed, the blood energy near exhaustion in Meng Chuan's body was like dry land meeting rain, actually spontaneously active, nourishing the hideous wounds on his chest. The speed of flesh wriggling also significantly accelerated. What shocked Meng Chuan even more was, this blood energy force actually vaguely had a sense of same-source resonance with the 9 turns mysterious technique he practiced. The surprise in the Tall Witch clan leader's eyes became even stronger. This cultivation method of yours, a bit interesting. He let go, and said to the 2 people behind him, injury is very heavy, but won't die. Bring him back. The Witch clan member with a scar on his face stepped forward, grinning, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Kid, your luck is not bad. We happen to be patrolling nearby, attracted by the movement of you and that lizard demon fighting, and then sensed the fluctuation of Huda's token. After speaking, he reached out to help Meng Chuan up. The action was not gentle, but carefully avoided the wound on his chest. The other Witch clan member holding an axe walked to the edge of the hole, taking a look outside. That lizard demon's corpse. How to dispose of? Mysterious immortal mid-stage demon object. The inner alchemy and scales still have some use. Mysterious immortal mid-stage. Meng Chuan was shocked again in his heart. No wonder it was so fierce. Bring it together, the Tall Witch clan leader said. He took one last look at this broken stone palace. His gaze swept over the hall, finding no special features, then turned around. Go, we are going back. Meng Chuan was half supported and half carried out of the stone palace by the scarred-faced Witch clan member. Outside the palace, the sun was dazzling. In the basin, the thick evil spirit seemed to be a bit thinner, and not far in front of the stone palace, the ground was smashed into a huge deep pit. At the bottom of the pit was a pool of dark green meat paste with difficulty in identifying the shape, and broken scales, and a bone hook broken into several sections. The mysterious immortal mid-stage lizard monster was actually smashed to death here with one strike. Meng Chuan's gaze fell on the bone hammer in the Tall Witch clan leader's hand, his heart awestruck. This was the strength of the Witch clan, pure power, extreme violence. The Tall Witch clan leader noticed his gaze, shook the bone hammer in his hand. That demon object, only good at sneak attacks and poison, head-on fighting, vulnerable to a single blow. He said it lightly, as if the bone hammer in his hand was just a fly swatter, just casually slapping a fly to death. The scarred-faced Witch clan member put Meng Chuan on the back of a ferocious mount that had been waiting for a long time, shaped like a giant tiger but with scales and bone spikes, and flipped onto it himself, sitting behind Meng Chuan to stabilize him. Sit tight, kid, now take you back to our tribe's nearby camp, the scarred-faced Witch clan member said while patting the mount's neck. The giant tiger mount roared low. 4 feet exerted force, slammed and rushed out. The Tall Witch clan leader and the axe-holding Witch clan member also each jumped on their mounts. 3 giant beasts turned into 3 afterimages, galloping towards the direction of Buzhou Mountain. The sound of wind whistled by his ears. The scenery on both sides flew backwards. Meng Chuan slumped on the back of the mount. The sharp pain and weakness in his chest came in waves, his vision becoming increasingly blurry. Before completely losing consciousness, he only had time to see the towering mountain shadow connecting heaven and earth in front, and under the mountain shadow, a rough and ancient architectural contour built of giant stones and giant woods. Witch clan, tribe, this thought flashed through his mind, then only felt black before his eyes, completely falling into darkness. When he woke up, Meng Chuan first smelled a strong fishy smell, the smell of medicinal herbs and beast fat burning mixed together. He was lying on thick untanned animal skin, rough hair pricking his skin. He opened his eyes. What met his eyes was a dome built of thick logs and giant stones, several threads of light penetrating through the gaps, illuminating the dust floating in the air. This was an extremely spacious stonewood hall, furnishings extremely simple. Except for this huge stone bed animal skin he was lying on, there was only a raging bonfire in the center, a giant stone pot that could stuff a person inside perched on the fire, thick soup rolling inside, stewing large chunks of unknown beast meat, fragrance strong and domineering. Beside the bonfire, there were casually placed a few giant stone axes, bone hammers, and some animal skins, bones, that had been processed halfway. Awake. A muffled sound came from the door. Meng Chuan supported his body to sit up, his chest still aching dull, but the injury had obviously improved. The damaged flesh had largely healed. The pale golden new skin was still a bit fragile. The tendons and bones under the skin were also slowly recovering step by step under the nourishment of blood energy. The most tricky loss of essence blood and tearing of meridians, however, could not be healed in a moment. He turned his head following the sound. It was that Witch clan man with a longitudinal scar on his face, leaning against the door frame with his arms crossed. He only wore knee-length leather pants, the exposed upper body muscles like stacked rocks on the copper skin. Besides that hideous scar, it was also full of all kinds of claw marks, tooth marks, and some primitive dark red totem tattoos. Where is this? Which clan tribe? Meng Chuan asked, his voice carrying a bit of hoarseness. A hunting camp of the Huda tribe. The scarred-faced man walked in, picked up a stone bowl from beside the bonfire, filled it with meat soup from the pot, and handed it to him. Drink soup, useful for restoring blood energy. Meng Chuan took it. The bowl heavy, soup hot. The meat chunks were almost the size of his fist. Stewed rotten. The grease mixed with the thick soup emitted a domineering fragrance. He blew on it, cautiously taking a sip. As soon as the soup entered his throat, it turned into a scorching flood rushing into his abdomen, then dispersed to his limbs and bones. Wherever it passed, the cold and stiff tendons and bones seemed to all come alive. Blood energy spontaneously accelerating. The dull pain on his chest also subsequently becoming a bit lighter. Delong beast's meat, added with a few kinds of fierce old herbs. The scarred-faced man also scooped a bowl for himself, squatting by the bonfire and drinking it in a few gulps, chewing the meat and bones until crack sounded. You are injured not lightly, especially the loss of essence blood. Ordinary methods cannot be nurtured back in a few months. 3 bowls of this soup a day. Drink for 10 days straight. Guarantee you alive and kicking. Meng Chuan drank the soup silently. Meat soup entered the abdomen, turning into pure blood energy, guided by the 9 turns mysterious technique, slowly making up for the loss of his body. The medicinal effect was indeed significant. Many thanks for saving me. He put down the bowl, saying solemnly, if you want to thank, then thank Hutadaran. The scarred-faced man waved his hand, pointing to Meng Chuan's bosom, where the bone piece was emitting a warm and moist heat. Without her token, even if you died in the ancient battlefield, we wouldn't look at it more than once. He said it directly, without beating around the bush. Meng Chuan, however, felt this was good, straightforward, generous and open. How long have I been unconscious? 3 days. The scarred-faced man wiped his mouth. The captain said, since you are valued by Hutadaran, then recuperate well here. After the injury heals, whether to go or stay, is all up to you. After finishing the soup, the scarred-faced man fetched another leather bag, filled with turbid yet extremely fierce liquid inside. Wine smell mixed with medicinal smell. Medicinal wine can be applied externally and taken internally. Deal with it yourself. After speaking, he no longer paid attention to Meng Chuan, picked up a stone axe and walked to the corner of the hall, gesturing at a thick beast bone, as if wanting to make it into some kind of weapon. Meng Chuan sat cross-legged on the stone bed, while guiding the medicinal power to heal. Observing this camp, successively, other witch clan warriors came in and out, each tall and burly, blood energy surging, wearing simple leather armor or only wrapped in animal skin, their bodies carrying scars and totems to varying degrees. They saw Meng Chuan, just glancing casually, nodding to signal, then each busy with their own affairs, or polishing weapons, or processing prey, or sitting around the bonfire tearing at meat, talking and laughing loudly. The content of the talk was also simple, nothing more than which hunting ground had fat fierce beasts, which demon clan patrol team crossed the line again, which brother was sneak attacked by a cunning shadow leopard while hunting the day before, and twisted the leopard's neck backhanded. Language rough, laughter refreshing, revealing a kind of primitive vitality and power in the prehistoric world. Meng Chuan just stayed in this noisy environment filled with blood and vitality, concentrating on recuperating. 3 bowls of Delong beast meat soup every day, supplemented by medicinal wine internally and externally. 9 turns mysterious technique was operated day and night without stopping. The rich blood energy environment in the witch clan camp was of great benefit to this technique. 10 days later, the trauma on Meng Chuan's chest had completely healed, the new skin emitting a pale golden luster, tougher than the surrounding skin. The tendons and bones under the skin also slowly recovering step by step under the nourishment of blood energy. The most tricky loss of essence blood and tearing of meridians, however, could not be healed in a moment. He could already get out of bed and walk. The scarred-faced man, named Yen, was the deputy captain of the hunting squad that saved him. Seeing him recovered well, then said, there is an open space behind the camp, where we usually practice strength and martial skills. If you are bored, you can go see. Meng Chuan thanked him, walked out of the stonewood hall. The camp was larger than he imagined, built against a mountain depression. The outer perimeter was a simple barrier built of giant trees and rocks, internally scattered with dozens of similar stonewood houses. Many witch clan men, women, old and young were active inside. Adult men were mostly as burly and strong as Yen. Women were tall and full of blood energy, responsible for processing prey, tanning leather, caring for some strangely shaped beasts. Children chased and played in the open space. At a young age could lift hundreds or thousands of pounds of stones to throw for fun. On everyone's body, there were more or less totem tattoos. The style simple and mysterious, very similar to the one on Yan's body. Meng Chuan walked to the open space behind the camp. The ground here was stepped on extremely firmly, placed with many huge stone locks, stone piers, bone or stone weapon racks. Several witch clan warriors were sparring. Collision of fists and feet emitting muffled loud noises. Blood energy surging, shaking the air with a buzzing sound. There were no redundant fancy techniques, only the purest strength, speed, and battle instinct tempered by 1,000 strikes. Meng Chuan watched for a while, his gaze attracted by something at the edge of the open space. That was a heavy stone slab about 3 zhang high, 1 zhang wide, roughly polished and flat, erected on a stone platform. On the stone slab, with some dark red pigment like dried blood, drew a huge pattern full of primitive barbaric atmosphere. That was a giant standing between heaven and earth, muscles coiled like dragons, eyes wide with rage, hands supporting the sky, feet treading the earth, surrounded by chaotic airflow, earth, water, fire, and wind surging. Although it was only rough lines and color blocks, it still naturally revealed an opening of heaven and earth, a vast will of breaking through eternity. Just looking straight at it for a moment, Meng Chuan felt his soul shake. 9 turns mysterious technique in his body accelerated spontaneously. The sound of blood running boomed in his ears. Pangu totem. He didn't need to ask. He guessed the meaning of this pattern. This was the ancestor worshipped by the witch clan, and also the source of their power. Meng Chuan walked closer involuntarily, stopping under the stone platform, looking up and gazing. Every line on the totem seemed to come alive, constantly evolving in his eyes, reorganizing. Those hands supporting the sky contained the supreme power of supporting chaos. Those feet treading the earth symbolized the extreme heaviness of suppressing earth, water, fire, and wind. Those eyes wide with rage were the vast will of breaking through the primordial and establishing yin and yang. In a trance, he seemed to see that this was not an image, not a legend, but a track of the most primitive and true force that had remained since the beginning of the opening of heaven and earth. It was the trace of the great Tao principles initially manifested when the great god Pangu opened up the prehistoric world with supreme divine power. This trace was remembered by the witch clan as a totem, inherited, worshipped. What it contained was precisely the Tao that best fit the 9 turns mysterious technique. Meng Chuan sat cross-legged on the spot, closed his eyes, no longer observing with his naked eyes, but with his heart and soul, with the same sourced 9 turns mysterious technique blood energy, to sense, to approach, to resonate. Inside his dantian, the golden energy vortex was rotating at an unprecedented speed. In the sea of consciousness, primordial golden dough clear light scattered, protecting the spiritual platform, making him able to be immersed in the realization without being crushed by that vast will. Blood energy running, tendons and bones echoing together. That track of force in the totem, like an invisible, formless, yet truly existing stream, flowed into his heart, flowed into his bloodline, flowed into the mysterious technique line he operated. The slightly vain heavenly immortal foundation, under the tempering of this track of force, was firmly hammered, beaten, condensed, bit by bit. The subtle stagnation he hadn't noticed during practice was quietly penetrated. Cognition of strength itself, from simple destruction, impact, began to move toward a more essential existence. Support, opening, extension. Every key point of the second turn of the 9 turns mysterious technique, the meridian nodes that had previously required slow grinding work to open, under the guidance of this same sourced great Tao, were actually like cutting through bamboo. One by one opened. Around Meng Chuan's body, faint golden light halo leaked out unconsciously, becoming more and more prosperous, faintly echoing and resonating with the dark red pigment on the totem. The sound of blood running in his body became louder, initially like a stream murmuring, then like a surging river, finally faintly emitting the sound of wind and thunder. Aura began to climb, from heavenly immortal mid-stage, all the way up, breaking through the late stage, approaching the peak. The witch clan warriors sparring on the open space had long stopped, gathering around, looking at the figure shrouded in golden light in front of the stone platform with shock and uncertainty. He is comprehending the totem. A young witch clan warrior whispered. Such strong blood energy resonance. What kind of cultivation method is he practicing? Actually able to produce such resonance with the father god totem. Another witch clan warrior, face full of horror. At this time, Yen and the tall and burly Captain Lai also walked out of the stone house, standing in front of the crowd, expression solemn. Captain, this. Yen looked at Lai. Lai watched the golden light on Meng Chuan's body becoming more prosperous, and the blood energy faintly merging with the totem, sighing. Hutadaran's token, indeed will not be gifted without reason. The cultivation method practiced by this child is afraid of having a very deep origin with the father god. Do not disturb him. Wait and see. This sitting was 7 days, until noon on the 7th day. Above the totem, that dark red Pangu image actually faintly emitted a layer of faint golden light halo, echoing and resonating with the golden light on Meng Chuan's body. The next moment, inside Meng Chuan's body, it seemed as if something shattered with a boom. The practice of the second turn of the 9 turns mysterious technique, in this 7 days of resonance and realization with the totem, was pushed to an unprecedented complete state. Blood energy, mana, flesh, soul, became one, perfect and without leakage. Heavenly immortal peak. Meng Chuan opened his eyes, golden light in his pupils like substance spitting more than a chi, then slowly collected. He stood up fiercely, his whole body's bones emitting a series of crisp explosions, faint golden patterns under the skin flashing and disappearing, surging blood energy hidden, no longer leaking half a point, returning to the basics. He looked at the Panga totem in front of him, bowed down, solemnly kowtowed once. This bow, thanks to the totem for passing the Tao. If not for the guidance of the truth of the great Tao of Pangu's opening heaven force contained within, he would absolutely not have been able to practice the second turn to completion so quickly, and even more so could not have such a profound cognition of the essence of strength. The totem was silent, only that dark red image, in the sun, flowing with an ancient and heavy luster. Meng Chuan turned around, looking at the gathered witch clan warriors behind him. The looks in everyone's eyes toward him had become different from before, missing some casualness when treating the wounded and outsiders, gaining some solemnity and exploration. Congratulations. Captain Lai stepped forward, saying in a deep voice, it seems this comprehension gained quite a lot, all thanks to the guidance of your clan's totem. totem. Meng Chuan bowed. Lai waved his hand. The totem is right there. Has been for countless years. Those who can realize things from it are few and far between. It is your own opportunity. He paused, said, your injuries are healed. Cultivation has also improved. What are your plans next? Meng Chuan was silent for a moment, looking at the vast and boundless prehistoric heaven and earth outside Buzhou Mountain. Junior needs to continue moving forward. Light of wanting to try shone in his eyes. The prehistoric is vast. Opportunities are countless. Calamities are also countless. Closing the door to practice hard is not the right path. I want to travel further away, seeking the opportunity for true immortal. He needed to break through to true immortal as soon as possible. Mysterious immortal, and even golden immortal. First lecture of Xianxia Palace. Minimum threshold golden immortal. He didn't know when exactly it would open, but it would definitely not be too far. Must hurry up, if not enter golden immortal. He didn't even have the qualification to step into the gate of Xianxia Palace, let alone listen to the Tao with 3,000 great powers, fighting for that ray of escape opportunity. Lai looked at him deeply, nodding. Good ambition. Since it is so, will not keep you. East from here, past 3 more ancient battlefields, there is a flame evil rift valley. Earth fire surging, evil spirit scorching. Ordinary cultivators avoid it. The cultivation method you practice is extremely young and extremely rigid. Maybe can borrow this to temper the body and refine the spirit, impacting true immortal. Inside also breeds fire attribute fierce things. There is no lack of true immortal and even mysterious immortal level existences. Must be careful. Meng Chuan bowed solemnly. Many thanks, senior, for the guidance. Meng Chuan stayed in the tribe for one more day, adjusting his state to the peak, and listened to Yan explain the general situation of the surrounding area, and various rumors and taboos of the flame evil rift valley. Early the next morning, Meng Chuan said goodbye and left. Yan and several familiar witch clan warriors sent him to the camp gate. Kid, don't die outside. Yan grinned, patting Meng Chuan's shoulder. The force was still astonishing. See you next time. Hope your cultivation has caught up with me. Then you and I can have a good sparring match. Meng Chuan also smiled. Definitely. He turned towards that stonewood hall, towards that Panga totem standing at the edge of the open space, bowed again. Following that, did not look back. Heavenly immortal peak mana in his body circulating. Taking a step forward, his figure turned into a faint golden stream of light, galloping towards the east. Goal. Flame evil rift valley. The door of true immortal was right in front of him. He needed to push it open as soon as possible. Flame evil rift valley. The land as its name implies. Meng Chuan stood at the edge of the rift valley looking down. Unconsciously had 4 words appear in his heart. Heaven and earth crucible. The earth here was brutally torn open by a grim crack stretching an unknown number of zhang deep, stretching for thousands of miles. The valley walls were red as blood, rock layers twisted, as if repeatedly kneaded by invisible giant force. No soil could be seen at the bottom of the valley, only the thick dark red magma surging endlessly, occasionally bubbling with giant bubbles, spraying out fierce fire rain when exploding. The air distorted violently due to high temperature. The line of sight was blurry and shaking. What was even more eye-catching was, above the entire rift valley, permeated a layer of gray-red mist. This was not water vapor, but the flame evil spirit in the prehistoric that had condensed into substance. Scorching, violent, turbid, just trying to breathe a breath, felt a burning pain in his throat, mana in his body faintly restless. Here was the confluence of earth fire and evil spirit, and also a dangerous forbidden zone where life is extinguished. But for Meng Chuan, it was precisely the place to break through the realm. He whispered, leaping down. His figure fell 100 zhang, scorching air waves hitting his face. Flame evil spirit rushed to entangle like a shark group smelling blood. Meng Chuan did not dodge. Faint golden light halo on his whole body flowing. 9 turns mysterious technique operated at full power, like a high-speed rotating grindstone, crazily swallowing and refining the surging flame evil spirit. The extremely young and extremely rigid mysterious technique mana fit the attribute of the fire evil force here, swallowing very smoothly. Scorching and violent fire evil force rushed into the meridians, bringing needle-pricking pain, but was soon smoothed out by surging blood energy, converted into pure mana flowing into the dantian. Meng Chuan's falling momentum gradually slowed, finally hovering at a protruding red rock platform in the middle of the rift valley. The platform was not big, only a few zhang in radius, the surface scorching. He sat cross-legged, forming seals with both hands. Primordial golden dough appeared from his brow heart, suspended above his head, scattering clear light screen to protect the whole body, resisting the erosion of flame evil spirit on his soul. Following closely, he operated the mysterious technique with all his strength. Boom! It was as if throwing a spark into a gasoline drum. The flame evil spirit of the entire rift valley was triggered at this instant. With Meng Chuan as the center, a huge gray-red vortex quickly formed, crazily swallowing the flame evil spirit from all directions. His body turned into a crucible, repeatedly tempering, purifying, converting the inflowing flame evil spirit. Mana soared, blood energy surging, flesh body continuously damaged and then rapidly reborn under the scorching of fire evil. Newborn muscles and bones, more resilient, emitting a faint red golden luster. In this process, time seemed to lose its meaning. Meng Chuan's heart was like an ancient well, without a ripple, just moving the great circle repeatedly, polishing mana, tempering the flesh. Don't know how long passed, or 10 days, or a a month. Inside the dantian, that golden energy vortex had expanded to the extreme, light blazing like a small sun, rotating faintly emitting the sound of wind, thunder and earth fire, the barrier of heavenly immortal peak. Thin as a cicada's wing, Meng Chuan opened his eyes, golden and red colors flowing in his pupils, opening his mouth to inhale. Boom! The huge gray-red evil spirit vortex above his head collapsed suddenly, turning into a thick light pillar, swallowed into his belly in one gulp. Inside the dantian, the golden energy vortex exploded with a boom. Not destruction, but rebirth. The exploded golden light turned into countless more condensed, more pure golden air currents, running, merging, reorganizing in his body. 5 Qi toward origin. The 5 origin Qi of the 5 internal organs of heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys correspond to the 5 elements of fire, wood, earth, metal, and water. Heavenly immortal cultivates mana, tempers flesh, while true immortal needs to lead the heaven and earth 5 elements Qi into the body, merge with the 5 internal organs origin Qi, refining the 5 Qi in the chest. 5 Qi circulation, endless. This is the base of true immortal. At this moment, Meng Chuan, who had swallowed massive flame evil spirit, the fire element Qi in his body, was the first to complete. Heart belongs to fire. Heart fire blazing, like the sun in the sky. Following that, using fire to generate earth. Earth element Qi sprouted from the spleen and stomach, thick carrying. Earth generates metal. Metal element Qi emerged from the lungs and internal organs, sharp and murderous. Metal generates water. Water element Qi rose from the kidney source, extremely soft and resilient. Water generates wood. Wood element Qi burst from the liver, wood, full of vitality. 5 elements rotation, generating and perfecting each other, turning into a mass of misty 5-color energy vortex between his chest and abdomen, rotating slowly. Every time it turned, pure mana was fed back to his whole body, nourishing flesh and blood, strengthening blood energy. Broken through. True immortal. Meng Chuan stood up, his whole body's bones emitting a series of crisp explosions like popping beans, gold and red patterns appearing under his skin, his aura far stronger than at the heavenly immortal peak. He clenched his fists, feeling the surging, completely different power in his body, mana more pure and condensed, faintly resonating with heaven and earth 5 elements during operation. Flesh intensity up another layer. Ordinary magic treasures difficult to hurt. What was more importantly, the 5 Qi in the chest formed a circulation by itself, mana recovery speed far exceeding that of heavenly immortal time. With my current true immortal early stage cultivation, cooperating with 9 turns mysterious technique, flesh body, plus primordial golden dough, Meng Chuan's eyes flashed with essence. Maybe can fight early stage mysterious immortal. Mysterious immortal. In this period of the prehistoric, although not top tier, but already a party expert, he leaped into the high sky, overlooking the surging flame evil rift valley below. This breakthrough, a matter of course, all relied on the special environment here and the fit of the mysterious technique. It is time. Meng Chuan looked toward the west, his gaze distant. Those pieces of information in his memory flashed through his mind. Kunlun, ancestor of 10,000 mountains, one of the prehistoric ancestor veins, where the 3 pure ones Taoist site is located. That place is vast and boundless. At this period, in its remote edge, hides an object, named Xianxia ruler. This treasure is an innate spiritual treasure, although not in the rank of supreme, but has its own heaven and earth wondrous use, can measure heaven and earth, fix earth, water, fire, and wind, and even contains a wisp of spatial Tao principles. No matter for fighting, escaping, arranging arrays, all have great use. In the original prehistoric trajectory, this treasure was obtained by Hongjun Dao ancestor, taken away by Ran Deng Daoist when distributing treasures at Fanbao Rock. But that was after the 3rd lecture of Xixiao Palace. Now the first lecture of Xixiao Palace has not opened. Hongjun has not merged with the Tao. This treasure should still be in that remote cliff wall of Kunlun, covered in dust and self-concealing, waiting for those with affinity. As for the other, golden dragon scissors, was obtained by the Tongtian sect master in the depths of the South Wilderness volcano, later gifted to 3 Shao ladies, shining brightly during investiture of the gods. In comparison, Kunlun is closer. Qianquan ruler, in the west of Kunlun, inside a cliff called Liantian Cliff, concealed by innate array. Going to Kunlun, the journey is long, need to cross the territories of several great clans on the way. Danger is everywhere. However, it is worth a fight. Meng Chuan did not hesitate anymore, identified the direction. True immortal mana in his body circulating. Primordial golden dough clear light wrapped around his whole body, turning into a golden green long rainbow and breaking through the air. Speed, several times faster than when he was heavenly immortal. All the way west. Along the way mountains and rivers magnificent. Marshes vast. Frequently could see fierce beasts fighting. Demon clouds crossing. Also had cultivators escape lights passing by. Aura either positive or evil. Meng Chuan had no intention to cause extra trouble. Tried his best to bypass places where spiritual energy was rich and forces were obviously occupied. Only walking in wild mountains and old forests. Occasionally, blind fierce birds and demon beasts blocking the way were also casually dealt with by him. Prehistoric does not remember years. Time slowly blurred. Meng Chuan didn't know how long he walked, until the terrain gradually became higher. Spiritual energy increasingly rich and pure. The sky presenting a clear glaze cyan color. On the horizon in the distance, faintly Suddenly appeared endless towering mountain shadows. The mountain shadows connected heaven and earth, clouds and mist lingering, the mountain body presenting a warm jade-white color, clearly separated very far, but already could feel that vast and boundless spiritual machine Dao Rhyme. Kunlun finally arrived. Meng Chuan pressed down his escape light, landing on the top of a nameless mountain peak. Looking from afar, Kunlun is too big to the point that with his current true immortal eyesight, he could not see the horizon. Mountains undulating, like giant dragons lying on the ground. Every mountain peak is spiritually beautiful and wonderful. Waterfalls and flowing springs, immortal cranes gathering, rare birds and strange beasts appearing in the forest. This place is the true prehistoric ancestor vein, cultivation holy land. Compared to the ancient battlefield he had been to before, Flame Evil Rift Valley, Witch Clan hunting ground, are completely two worlds. Liantian Cliff, at the edge of the west of Kunlun, close to the weak water. That place is remote, spiritual energy relatively thin, few cultivators tread. Meng Chuan followed the information in his memory, set off again, sticking to the mountain trend, flying toward the west. Flying for 3 more days, the towering spiritual beauty of the Kunlun main vein moved away. Terrain gradually desolate, rocks jagged, vegetation sparse, spiritual energy also thin a lot. In front appeared a wide murky yellow river. River water viscous, flowing silently. No waves could be seen on the river surface, yet emitting a dead silence atmosphere of all things sinking. Weak water. Goose feathers do not float. Immortal Buddhas difficult to cross. Beside the weak water, is a gray-white cliff stretching endlessly. Height over 1,000 zhang. Steep as if cut. Rock body smooth. Nothing grows. Here is the destination of his trip. Liantian Cliff. Meng Chuan landed at the bottom of the cliff. Looked up. The cliff towered into the clouds. Rock body whole. No gaps or entrances visible. Divine sense swept over. Also blocked and rebounded by an invisible force. Sure enough, there is an innate array covering it. He was not surprised. If an innate spiritual treasure like the Qianquan ruler could be obtained easily, it wouldn't be his turn. Meng Chuan closed his eyes and concentrated, mind sinking into the sea of consciousness, sensing with the primordial golden dough.